Hello, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Please note this webinar is being recorded. It will be available for viewing on our website and social media pages after the event. We'll also be sending out the link to all of you that are joining us today. Today's webinar is brought to you in partnership with the Am Yisrael Foundation, White City Shabbat, Tel Aviv International Salon, Tribe Tel Aviv, American Zionist Movement, Zohar, the Eye Center, the Israel Forever Foundation, Karen Keshet, Safta, Safar Midrash, and Mikor Rishon. So I would like to thank you all for being here. I would also like to note that there is a Hebrew program running concurrently as well. Please join me in welcoming Rabbi Jonathan Feldman from Tribe Tel Aviv and the Am Yisrael Foundation.
Thank you, Alicia, for your partnership and taking care of so much on the tech end. Alicia is the program director at American Zionist Movement at AZM. And welcome, everyone. We are at our very Israeli Pre-Leil Tikkun Shavuot. And normally, of course, Tikkun Shavuot is on the night of Shavuot. We stay up learning, which we hopefully will be doing tomorrow night, God willing. But in our age of social distancing, we've brought it to the night before Shavuot so we can share our learning and we can hear from Israeli thought leaders and very special heroes and personalities from the Jewish people to inspire us so we can continue on tomorrow night with our own learning. I'd like to share with you myself how we can make Shavuot meaningful for this year and the mission and vision of the Jewish people for the future. Daniel Pipes, the New York Times op-ed writer and Pulitzer Prize winner, got himself into trouble last winter in one of his op-eds when he tackled the question of Jewish intelligence. And he noted at the beginning Jewish accomplishment, the Jewish thinkers who impacted the 20th century, Sigmund Freud, Albert Einstein, Karl Marx, noting the high percentage of Jewish Nobel Prize winners, Jewish accomplishments in so many different fields. You cannot find that on the op-ed. It was taken off after all the controversy. But what you will see is his discussion of this. Now, his mention of Jewish intelligence was really a side point, and that's what he got lambasted on. But his main point was this. His main point that what he believed is behind Jews' incredible impact on the world and incredible success is the way, as he described it, Jews have such a bracing originality and high-minded purpose and are prone to question and think differently. Now, his take on that was that all the years in exile when we had to uproot and move and readapt constantly, that is what gave us these qualities that then got applied to other areas of life and brought about these incredible Jewish accomplishments. He did mention as a very brief point another factor which might play into it, which is what he said was the religious tradition that, unlike some others, asks the believer not just to observe and obey, but to discuss and to disagree. And that small point, I believe, is really the main point behind what he was trying to get at. The main point behind what brings us to who we are, what has brought us to who we are as a Jewish people. Now, this tradition of questioning, you find, of course, throughout the Talmud, which is in dialectical form, is constantly questions, answers, back and forth, but really all Torah learning, we apply that method. And it's this religious tradition of Talmud Torah and the primacy of Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam. Jews has been always ahead of the curve in terms of literacy for our people and lifelong learning, and that's what we'll be celebrating on Shavuot. And so this really goes back to Shavuot, to the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. That's really where it all originates that gives us our Jewish uniqueness. Now, I'd like to look at a couple of midrashim, of rabbinic teachings about the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai 3,300 years ago. And the Talmud in Zvachim says this. It says, when the Torah was given, the sound went from one end of the world to the other. Now, this was certainly before telephones, before internet, before Twitter. So how do we understand this? What does this mean, that the sound of the Torah was heard throughout the world when the Torah was given? And another teaching, the Sifri, Zot HaBracha, too, when the Holy One revealed himself in order to give the Torah to Yisrael, to the Jewish people, he shook the world with all his inhabitants. And it quotes Psalm 29, the voice of God is over the waters, Kol Hashem b'mayim, the God of glory thunders. So once again, this idea of this incredible sound heard throughout the world when the Torah was given. So what does this mean? How do we understand it? And if we scope forward and look at the impact of the Torah, which we will do, we start to understand what this means. But let's start with the event at Mount Sinai. Let's start at looking at the Torah, the giving of the Torah itself. And I'd like to look at what I believe is really the most important introduction to the giving of the Torah. And that is one line. Moshe and the Jewish people arrive at Mount Sinai 6 days before. And during that time, Moshe is going up and down from the mountain, communicating. God is communicating through Moshe with the Jewish people, telling them about the deal they're about to broker, what's involved in terms of receiving the Torah. And this most important line is Exodus 19:6, Atem tiyu li mamlechet kohanim v'goy kadosh, where God says, if you accept the Torah and follow its dictates, then you will be to me a mamlechet kohanim, a kingdom of kohanim, often translated as priests, although that doesn't really convey the sense of kohanim being the divine representatives, those who will be representing God amongst the Jewish people. So we're to be a Malach Kohanim v'Goy Kadosh, which will translate now as a holy people. So what is Mamlechet Kohanim? What does this mean? To be a kingdom of priests, if you will, of God representatives. So Rav Ovadia Sforno, the great 16th century Italian commentator, he understood this, that just like the Kohanim are a sub-tribe of the Jewish people and are dedicated, we're dedicated to teaching Torah, to serving in the temple, to being the representatives of the Almighty, of bringing Torah and godliness to the Jewish people. So what Rav Ovadia Sforno is saying is that similarly, the Jewish people will have this special role in bringing godliness to the world. That's what it means for us to be a Mamlechet Kohanim. And he says, because of this, you will call on the holy name of God and serve him, and that will be understood by all of mankind. Now we see this universal mission of the Jewish people, bringing a godly message of ethical monotheism to the world. We see it in the famous line in Isaiah, where it says, it's not enough that you should be my servant, in that I raise up the tribes of Jacob. He said, it's not enough to just be a Goy Kadosh, to have this, cultivate this godly people. And then it goes on to say, and he says, I will make you La'or Goyim, which is usually translated as a light unto the nations, that my salvation will reach to the ends of the earth. So what is La'or Goyim? The Malbim, a 19th century commentator in Eastern Europe, said, if you will enlighten them for true belief, if you will bring this message of justice and righteousness and the belief in God to the world, he said, and the belief in fixing the world, said, then the world will not go in darkness and they will come to recognize God's unity. So La'or Goyim, is expressing this idea as well of the Jewish people's mission. There are other verses in the Torah that express this. Deuteronomy 10:28:10 says, all the nations will see God's name has been called upon you and will respect and revere you. So we will get respect for being God's people and for what we represent. And Deuteronomy 4:6 says, observe the commandments, the mitzvot, faithfully, because they are proof of your wisdom and discernment to the other peoples. And when they see them, they will say, surely this is a great and wise nation. So we see throughout the Torah and the prophets this idea of mamlechet kohanim, of a mission for the Jewish people to bring godliness to the world. But now let's turn to the second half of the statement, a holy nation. What is Goy Kadosh? So the word holiness is very abstract. You know, when you think of holy, you kind of think of gossamer clouds and little cherubim fluttering through with little, from medieval paintings. But in Judaism, it's much more defined. So the first definition, Nachmanides says, Kadosh means separate. And so it means we should be a separate nation, and separate not just because we want to cut ourselves off, or not just because of xenophobia or isolationism, but separate, dedicated towards a purpose. That also is the intent behind the word kadosh. And so we see also the non-Jewish prophet Bilam recognized this, Badad Yishkon, a nation that dwells apart. He calls us, and we're not reckoned, we're not counted amongst the other nations. So this mission statement given to the Jewish people has a tension in it. It has a tension of universalism, of us being here to bring a message to the Jewish people, and our ultimate view of that fulfillment is a messianic era when, through united belief in God and in monotheism and in the message of the Torah, all the world will unite. And at the same time, though, we're told that as Jews, as a people, we need to have our particularism. We need to be separate. We need to be distinct from other peoples. And that's brought us a lot of enmity as well. And so the question is, if we're supposed to be apart, how can we be a light unto the nations? How can both models work together? Now we see both of these models expressed all the way back at the beginning. If you look at Abraham, he was out in the world. He was making allegiances with his neighbors. He was bringing strangers into his tent. He was trying to spread his message. And when he left Haran, when he left Ur-Kasdim, when he left Iraq, it says he left with the Nefesh Asher Asu B'Haran, with the followers whom he had impacted. On the other hand, the next generation, Yitzchak, seems to be much more of an internal personality, seems to not have had that outwardness that Abraham had. And all of a sudden we wonder, where are all those followers that Yitzchak, that Abraham had developed, where are they now? And we don't see any mention of them. And throughout Jewish history, we've seen two models of Jewish community. We've seen Jewish communities that are very integrated into their environment, into the surrounding culture, like the Golden Age of Spain in the early Middle Ages. And at the same time, you had the Jewish community in France, which was much more isolated and much more internal and focused within, very disconnected from from the Christian dark ages that surrounded it. And so both of these models are expressed through the Jewish people. Today in Israel, there's a lot of tension between these different models of Jewish communities that are more insulated, like the Haredim, and those who would reach out and embrace modern culture. And so the question comes back to, well, how are we supposed to have both of these and impact the world at the same time? So one model is to say that through creating a model society in Israel, that will be a beacon for the rest of the world by looking at us and seeing this incredible country that we have. And we can be very proud of that Israel does do this, even reaching out, whether it's going to hurricane and earthquake-stricken areas and bringing relief, whether it's bringing children with heart problems to Israel to be treated medically, whether it's bringing water technology to Africa or to Sub-Asia. We can be in our country and still send the message that we are there for the world. Another approach is to say that, well, we weren't always in our country. We were exiled. We were, for 2,000 years, a wandering people. And there's a very striking text in the Talmud, in Gorim Psachim 87b, that says God exiled the Jewish people in order to increase the number of gerim, of those who would come into our people. In other words, to be out there to impact others. That's another model. But Maimonides even gives us a third model. And this is also very striking. It was edited out of the classic text of the Mishneh Torah, Hilchot Malachim. You can find it in the Frenkel edition where it's inserted back in. And it's not clear if we edited it ourselves or whether the non-Jewish editors took it out. But what Maimonides says, after discussing the kind of all the violence done in the name of Christianity and the errors of those beliefs, and after talking about the Ishmaelites and not naming Muhammad by name, but implying Islam as well, and how they veered off the path of the Torah, and much wrong has been done in the name of those two movements, of those two religions, he then turns around and says, but God's ways are hidden, and we don't always understand them. And nevertheless, these movements are bringing the word of God to the world and preparing it for the Messianic times. So Maimonides sees within these other movements, indirectly, the message of the Torah and Judaism being spread. And there's a very striking quote in the writings of Nachmanides, where he even talks about Lomdei Toratenu, those who study our Torah, and he's referring there to Christianity and to Islam. So both Nachmanides and Maimonides, the two greatest medieval sages, saw our impact on the world coming through these other religions and these other movements. Now, so these are three different models of how we balance this. Create a model society within our country and yet still reach out. When we're in exile, having an impact on the society around us, and indirectly through other religions or belief systems where Judaism might have permeated and might have impacted. And I want to focus on this a little bit because the word of John Adams, the second president of the United States, this is what John Adams said: I will insist that the Hebrews have done more to civilize men than any other nation. Okay, very striking quote. And we know that the founding fathers of the United States were very rooted in their Puritan traditions, which was Protestantism, which went back to the Old Testament. And Thomas Jefferson even studied Talmud behind the Old Testament. They turned to Torah books because they understood that this was the source of what it came to be called the Judeo-Christian tradition, right? In Harvard and Yale, classics were studied, and Hebrew was a primary classical language that was studied. And if you look at the original promise to Abraham, it's very striking because if you think about it, I mean, here was a nomadic chieftain living 3,300 years ago, maybe who had gathered some followers, who was traveling from Ur-Kasdim to the land of Canaan. And when God tells him to leave, he says, through you, through you will be blessed all the nations of the earth. Now, that seems a very striking and almost preposterous promise to give. 3,300 years ago, telling Abraham, all of the families of the earth will be blessed through you. What could that possibly have meant? And so, once again, fast forward 3,300 years, and we look at the what we call the ethical monotheistic tradition. And today in the world, over 2 billion people credit their teachings to go back to Abraham. And close to half the world's population are followers, self-avowed followers of his teachings. In different versions, different forms, but that's the vision. And that's how I understand this incredible promise given to Abraham 3,300 years ago. Unbelievable, right? And we see it unfolding, we see it impacting the world. And so if you look at the impact, I mean, why did John Adams say this? That we have done more to civilize the world than any other nations? So there's a striking quote by Paul Johnson, a non-Jewish historian who wrote the history of the Jews. And yes, folks, I am quoting non-Jewish historians because we say, well, you know, at least we can assume they're not biased like a Jewish person might be, right? So this is what Paul Johnson says. He says, certainly the world without Jews would have been a very different place. To them we owe the idea of equality before the law, both divine and human, of the sanctity of life and the dignity of the human person, of the individual conscience, and so a personal redemption of collective conscience and of social responsibility, of peace as an abstract ideal, and many other items which constitute the basic furniture of the human mind. And so, what is Paul Johnson saying? He's identifying what one could put in a list as unique Jewish ideas which have become the standard outlook of what we call the Western world, the enlightened world of humanity today. These ideas include the concept of world peace and brotherhood of man, expressed by Isaiah 2,400 years ago and on the Isaiah wall opposite the UN. No one should lift a sword unto another. And here we've seen that it took the world 2,300 years ago to put that up on a wall and all get together. And with all of its imperfections, at least we're mouthing it. At least the world is mouthing those ideals. We see from the Torah the absolute value of human life. And it's very striking in an age of coronavirus, the way the entire world shut down. Now you could say, yes, everyone was in danger, but we know it was mostly elderly and immunocompromised who were in danger. And yet everyone else is sacrificing so much to protect the absolute value of human life in all countries throughout the world. When in the world there used to be human sacrifice, deformed children placed on a mountaintop to die, and yet now this value is universal. The idea of the equality of all before the law, as Paul Johnson said, the concept of universal education, and even the idea of being kind to the stranger, which in the ancient world, it was really xenophobia and take care of your own. So these values, which have impacted the world, really we can trace back to the Torah. And we can trace back to the holiday of Shavuot and to this moment of the giving of the Torah itself. And recognizing this contribution of the Torah and this vision of Abraham, which we see spreading and continuing to spread, this reflects what the Jewish people is all about. And really being dedicated to the Torah and to studying Torah, why should one be? What is it that's special? So, first of all, if we view that there's something that can be brought to our own lives, into our own community, in our own society, that's one importance that we have. And, many years in the United States, being a rabbi, I get calls from parents, Rabbi, can you do something? My child is marrying someone not Jewish. What can you do? And I said, well, it really depends on how they value their Judaism and whether they see it as having a value for them and whether they see it as having a value for the world. Really, that's so much of that message. But in order to keep, even if one does value it, and even one does see it, the importance of it, we still have to keep it. We still have to safeguard it. And that's the Goy Kadosh. That's the focusing inward. Those are the mitzvot, which bind us as a people, which bind us to God, which sometimes cause distance from the outside world, but which has maintained us as a people. The high ideals of the Torah and the details of Torah life and of the commandments, which create the structure through which we can live it. There's a striking story of Menachem Begin, when he was first prime minister, was invited to the White House and was going to, with Jimmy Carter, and there was a banquet held, and he insisted that the banquet be kosher. And at the banquet, Menachem Begin took out a kippah in the White House and said, the hamotzi lechem min ha'aretz, in front of everyone. And he gained respect, not ridicule, for doing that. And so the Goy Kadosh part of our people is as vital as the Mamlechet Kohanim. And there's a funny story told about George Bernard Shaw. And the story was that he wasn't a particularly beautiful human being, but he was a brilliant intellect. And he was at a party, at a social event, with one of the Marilyn Monroes of the time. And she went up to him and gushed, George Bernard, imagine if we had got married and have children and they had your brains and my looks, imagine what children we would have. To which he quipped back, yeah, but what happens if they have my looks and your brains? So in our desire to be a light unto the nations, we always have to remember that we can't dilute ourselves to the point where we don't retain our individuality and our distinctiveness of who we are as Jews. And so there's both sides of the tablets of the Ten Commandments, the laws between man and man, and the laws between man and God. And both are really needed as vital components for our peoplehood. So we come back to Bret Stephens, we come back to what is Jewish exceptionality, that through Torah study, we see that how we've preserved as a people, how we've impacted the world as a people. And that's really the message of Shavuot. And I'd just like to end with the last 2 minutes of talking about, so what does the Shavuot mean to us on a personal level? What is the meaning of the holiday? And the Tivot Shalom, the Slonim Rebbe, is a very beautiful teaching. So he says, first of all, that Jewish holidays are not just a commemoration of an event 3,300 years ago, as Shavuot is. Jewish holidays, every year we come back to the same energy and to the same experience. And so every year we have an opportunity to receive the Torah. And he says not only that, but the Torah we study on Shavuot will set the tone for our Torah study the entire year, will give us a lead in that. And he said more than that just like Rosh Hashanah is a new year setting our year for our material well-being, Shavuot is the holiday that sets our path for our spiritual well-being for the coming year till the next Shavuot. And that's partially why we have the custom to stay up all night studying Torah, to show our enthusiasm and how much we want to absorb Torah on this day of the giving of the Torah. And then the Tivot Shalom says, furthermore, that on Shavuot, the two breads were brought, the Mincha Chadasha, the new offering. And so he says that's a message, the new offering of wheat. It was the first time that new wheat was used in the temple. So he says that's a message to us that our Torah should be renewed, that it should be a new offering to God of rededicating ourselves to study Torah, of exploring Torah in a new way, and of making our Torah fresh and exciting and relevant for us and in our lives. And so we hope the rest of this evening will bring you these messages, will inspire us so that the holiday of Shavuot can be one that leads to a receiving of the Torah, leads to the elevation of ourselves, our communities, the Jewish people, and God willing, the entire world. Thank you. We have an amazing lineup of speakers tonight. I imagine you've all seen the schedule. And our next speaker, I feel an incredible privilege to be able to introduce. Natan Sharansky is one of my own personal heroes. And throughout the years of the Soviet Jewry movement, of being demonstrating on 2nd Avenue. I did not get arrested, Natan, but I was out there when 1986, the demonstrations in Washington, D.C. We always looked to Natan Sharansky as a sign of Jewish strength and Jewish pride and Jewish dedication. Natan Sharansky was born in the Ukraine. He was a spokesman for the human rights movement and a prisoner of Zion, which we'll be hearing about from him directly. He established, when he spent 9 years in prison, following the massive campaigns of the State of Israel World Jewry, Mr. Sharansky was released in 1986 and made Aliyah on the very day of his release. When he came here, he established the Zionist Forum to assist Soviet Olim in their absorption in Israel. In the 1990s, he established the Yisrael Ba'aliyah Party in order to accelerate the integration of Russian Jews in Israel. And he served at the time in 4 successive governments, minister and deputy minister. In 1981, then he served from 2009 to 2018 as the chairman of the executive of the Jewish Agency for Israel, which is also responsible for Aliyah. In 2018, he received the highest Israel award, the Israel Prize for promoting Aliyah and ingathering of exiles. And I understand Mr. Sharansky just received the Genesis Prize as well and is donating the prize to help Israel. He also received the Congressional Medal of Honor in 1986 in the United States and the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2006. He's the only living non-American to receive both of these awards. And in 2019, he became the chair of the Institute for the Study of Global Anti-Semitism and Policy. Mr. Sharansky has written The Case for Democracy, the books The Case for Democracy, Defending Identity, and Never Alone, Prison Politics and My People, which I look greatly forward to reading. It's coming out this summer because his 4th book, Fear No Evil, about his time in jail, is one of say my favorite books, but the books I cherish as having had an impact on my life. So Natan, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Rabbi, and I'm glad to participate in your Leil Shavuot studies from Jerusalem. Well, all these days between Pesach and Shavuot is days connecting us from the moment we got our freedom, left Egypt, and to the moment when we got our mission, our identity. And it's a very powerful connection. And I happened to learn about power of this connection in my own life because I was lucky. I was deprived of both. I lived in Soviet Union having no identity and no freedom. And then I discovered them both and their connection. And I want to speak about it. I was one of millions of absolutely assimilated Jews. And in assimilated Jew, it's not like today in America, it means that after your bar mitzvah, you don't go back to synagogue. In our case, we had no bar mitzvah, no brit milah, no synagogue. We didn't know such words. We had no language, no book in which you can study this language, no place, no Pesach, no Purim, nothing. But we had a lot of anti-Semitism. That was the only really Jewish thing which we had. And it was clear, we learned it from our parents, that in order to succeed in this world, in spite of this anti-Semitism, you must be the best in physics, mathematics, chess, whatever. You must be the best in your profession. And that is the way how we Jews survive. So it was all about survival. It was not about becoming free, because you know you live in the empire. You are not supposed, totalitarian regime, you're not supposed to choose what book to read or what opinion to express. And you know that all this in the world of lies, but the truth is kept for your family, for closest friends. And this double life is very uncomfortable, but you don't even think to fight against this injustice, against this lie, because there are no values in their life except from the survival. And when all this changed, when there came the voice, not from Sinai, but from Jerusalem, Har Habayit B'Yadenu. Well, Israel won in this six-day war. We didn't know what Har Habayit is. We knew that Israel is a Jewish state, and that's why we all, of course, were supporting Jewish state because it is against anti-Semites, our enemies. But at the same time, you are very busy with your career and with your survival problem. But then you find out, you discover that the world around you changes. All these people around you, friends and enemies, those who sympathize to you and those who hate you, they all look at you with amazement and they say, how you guys did it. They don't ask me how maybe you, because you're Jewish, you have some connections in Israel, maybe you can explain us how it happened that Soviet Union was humiliated and defeated so easily. No, they're asking how you guys did it. So for them, for all these people around you, you're connected to Israel and you want to understand why the world connects you to Israel. And that's when we start studying in the underground, from the books which were brought by American, European, Australian, and other Jews as tourists. They were coming as tourists. They were bringing books which you could read in the underground. And from reading, you discover that with some twist of your mind, you can be part of very exciting history, such an interesting history, which doesn't start from Bolshevik Revolution, from Marx and Lenin. It starts from living Egypt. And from Exodus from Egypt to Exodus of Leonuris, a book brought by one of the tourists that you're reading, and discovering that people of your age are participating in this unique history. And then you look again on this picture of the soldiers near the Kotel and you realize they are exactly of your age. They are 19 years old and you're 19 years old. And they are part of such an interesting, exciting events. They're making the history. And what are you doing? Only surviving, only making, trying to build your professional career in spite of all these restrictions and going deeper and deeper in this world of lies. So that you discover the history that you want to be part of. You discover that there are Jews who are your people. They are coming from different parts of the world. They are tourists. They meet you and they say, oh, your father is from Odessa. My father is from Odessa. And we are family. We want to help you. And of course, you discover that there is the state of Israel, which is ready to send the airplanes to the end of the world, but to help you. So that's how you discover your identity. That here is the history, here are the people, here is the state that you want to be part of it. And that's what gives you initially the strength to break this world of lies and to say simply one phrase that I don't really want to live here. I don't want to belong here. I want to go to Israel. The moment you say it, you will be fired from your work. Your apartment can be searched. KGB can interrogate you. Some of your friends will ask you to take their names from your telephone book in order not to be called by KGB. But you become free person because for the first time you say things which you really think. There is no difference between what you think and feel and what you say and what you do. And so you find out that suddenly you have strength to fight for your rights, for the rights of the other Jews, and then for the freedom. So this feeling of inner freedom comes together with your identity. It's unseparable. You cannot separate it. And when later, again and again, some people are telling, decide, are you the nationalist or you're activist of human rights? Do you want to better the world, or you do want only to fight for your tribe? I thought it's ridiculous even to choose between these two things. Because if I have any strength, if I found strength to fight for my freedom, for my identity, for better world, it's only because I found that there are roots, that there are sources which give me strength. And so to deepen this feeling of your identity, you're trying to study in the underground, of course. In the beginning, it's in the underground. Hebrew, we try to learn about our history. And more or less, some of us start studying religion. They try to reestablish this connection with our faith, which was fully lost. I can tell frankly, for me, first of all, it was tremendous experience, historical experience. Here is a history that I want to be part of it. Then it was national experience. Here are the people. Then there was cultural experience. I would say religious experience, this feeling that we are getting, that we are all standing on Har Sinai and getting our Torah came much later. And I'll tell you how. I was, after many years, no, a few years of activity, of being activist, demonstrator, and then spokesman of two movements, Zionist movement and human rights movement in the Soviet Union, I was arrested and accused in high treason. And of course, KGB explained me immediately that now if I will not cooperate with them, I'll be sentenced to death. There were no such examples in the history of Soviet Union that somebody who is officially declared to be a spy will not be sentenced to death if he will not cooperate. And what means cooperate? It means to go to the press conference and to say that they are right and we are wrong. And they explain, of course, to you that you're alone, that every Jewish activist is arrested, every human rights activist is arrested, Jews of the world are afraid even to mention our names, and for a year and a half interrogations, you're absolutely isolated. What gave me strength? I had no doubt that all what they are saying is absolute lie. The Jewish people don't stop fighting even for a moment. Because I had already this experience of our struggle for a few years, and I knew very well that our struggle couldn't continue in one day. From the very beginning, it was the struggle of all the Jews of the world. When we were going on the demonstration of 10 people standing for 5 minutes, demonstration of the Red Square, and we will be all arrested, our power was from the knowledge that we'll be arrested, but next morning, hundreds of thousands of Jews will go on their demonstrations, will appeal to their senators and congressmen, will demand from their governments to act, that the Senate will and Congress will pass the laws linking all the interests of Soviet Union with the fate of Soviet Jews. That's how we were building the struggle, and we knew, we felt that all the Jewish people are part of this struggle. So now that I'm isolated in prison, I have to convince myself again and again that the reality which describes KGB has nothing to do with reality. That the reality of Jewish people fighting for my release and for the release of other Jews, that is the real world in which I continue living mentally even in prison. And then There were a year and a half of interrogation, then the trial, which of course they tried to turn into the trial against Soviet Union, and then years of prison. And that's how I heard the supporting voice of our God in prison. You know, a few days before my arrest, I received a small psalm book, which was brought by one of American tourists, together with a note from my wife. My wife was already in Israel. We met when I was a refusenik in the middle of the struggle. We decided that we have to be together, but I insisted that she'll try to go because she's not yet refusenik, and at least one of us will be in Israel. So she went to Israel next day after the Chuppah. And here for 2 years already, I continue our struggle, but we are not together, and she keeps struggling for our release from Israel. And she sends a small psalm book with a note. This book was with me for the whole year, and I have a feeling that the time has come to send it to you. And I am too busy. It is just a moment of big tension. Two of my friends, human rights activists, were just arrested. So official Soviet press already accused me in being American spy. 8 KGB tails are accompanying me every moment in the street. We have demonstrations, we have appeals, we have a lot of activity. And I opened this small book and I can't understand the text. There are so many words which I don't know. And in fact, if you didn't learn the rules, you don't even understand where is the end and beginning of the sentence. And I decided, okay, it's not the time to deal with these things, but I'll have time from very important work that I'm doing, I'll try to read it. I put it aside. A few days after this, I'm arrested. I'm arrested, and they bring me the long list of personal things which were confiscated. And one of them is written small book, black book, not in Russian. And then that's the psalm book which I've told, send it to me. And I demanded they'll give it to me. And of course they refused. And then there was a struggle for a long time, they'll give me this psalm book. I received it 3 years after I was arrested, together with the telegram from my mother that my father passed away. Of course, this type of news is always very tragic and difficult to deal with, to cope with. But especially when you are absolutely isolated, you cannot be with your mother, you cannot be with your family, you cannot console them and they cannot console you. And then I decided what I can do. Well, it's not a coincidence. They gave, together with the telegram, they finally gave me this psalm book. I'll be reading it until I will understand. So imagine here is the text, hundreds of thousands of letters and words, hundreds of thousands. And you don't know where the beginning and where the end of the sentence. And I use my first profession as a mathematician and mathematical logics. I take every word that I know and look on all the connections in the other sentences and try to understand the connections. And it so happened that from all this ocean of words, the first 11 words which made a sentence, clear sentence, which like jumped on me from this ocean, were 11 words, Gam ki elech begei tzalmavet lo ira ra ki ata imadi. And when the Psalm 23, and when you go through the valley of death, fear no evil because you are with me. Who is you? It can be King David, who wrote it. It can be my wife, who sent it to me. It can be people of Israel. It can be Kadosh Baruch Hu, God. And the feeling is really all of them together. All this team led by Kadosh Baruch Hu with 2 messengers, King David and my wife Avital. They're coming to prison to strengthen me, to tell you should fear no evil because we Jewish people are with you. And that's it. And then it took me probably a couple of months to understand all the Psalms, but after this it was easy because every sentence had the same message. Here you are part of these people who got their identity and their mission on the Har Sinai, and you're one of them, and you're reminded about it in prison. There are no walls which can isolate you. There is nobody in this world who can stop us from our journey with the mission through the centuries, and the struggle continues. And of course, then I never could permit to separate me from this psalm book. I was fighting to keep it with me for years in the prison. And even when they took me suddenly from prison, changed all my clothes, and they took to the airplane, and they didn't know yet what's happening. So I was lying in the snow near the airplane, insisting that I'll be brought back my psalm book. Simply, all my belongings were taken away. They gave me all the new clothes, but this thing I couldn't let out because that was my connection with the journey of our people. And that was the only property which I brought with me to Israel. And the day which started in Soviet prison, finished, and then all through Berlin, Eastern Berlin, Western Berlin, then meeting with my wife in Frankfurt, who I didn't see for 12 years, then coming to the Ben Gurion airport and ending near the Kotel, where I could open this psalm book and read the most powerful lines which kept me in all those years. So that is the way how I discovered my identity and how I discovered my freedom. It all starts from inside of you. But you hear the voice of God, you feel yourself strengthened by your identity, and you can fight for your freedom. And that's in fact the story, and maybe in less dramatic terms, less pressed time experience, but that's the story of millions of Soviet Jews who seemed like absolutely lost for their people and for our history. And not only they joined their people, but their strengths together brought down the most powerful empire in the world, and also Iron Curtain. But it's not only the story of Soviet Jews. As I said, we could never succeed in our struggle if it wasn't the struggle of all the Jews of the world, and of course, leading role of the State of Israel. And in this struggle, many American Jews, many Jews of Europe, and they were telling again and again, they rediscovered their identity. Their identity was something very passive for them. It was some kind of heritage which they got from their grandparents. They continued to respect, but not more than this. And suddenly they felt that they can be active part of our history. And this rediscovery of our identity by Soviet Jews, and then rediscovery of their identity by Jews of the West together, that's what made this struggle so powerful. And of course, without the voice which was coming from Israel, when Israel reunified Jerusalem, it reunified the world Jewry. And that's how I feel very strongly. And that's why each time when I'm coming back to Soviet Union, when I'm the head of Jewish agency, I had to be there many times, dealing with many projects and bringing many new immigrants who are coming from Russia, Ukraine, and many other parts of the world. I always, and I am asked, is it painful for you? Is it difficult for you to come up there? I will say to the contrary. That's the place which reminds us how we, Jewish people, are strong and powerful when we hear the voice of God, when we are united in our desire to continue our journey together. And then no power in the world, no power of today, no iron curtains can stop us in our desire to make this world better and more free place. Hag Shavuot Sameach.
Thank you, Natan, for that inspiring talk, those inspiring words. We are opening up to questions, so the participants can put on the chat questions if you'd like to ask Natan Sharansky. I will ask the first one. And many people struggle with belief. Was there one moment that kind of solidified it for you? Was it that verse from the Psalms, or was it a gradual process? And then I would ask, how did you keep your belief under such horrific conditions for years in prison, much of which was in isolation?
Well, on one hand, as I said, all our Hazara B'Teshuvah, returning back to our Jewish roots, it was a process. And there were many stages. And as I said, the real feeling of connection with the faith, that came only in prison. In fact, punishing cell in prison is an excellent place to feel yourself connected to all the Jewish people and to God. I could only hope that while I was, after 9 years in prison, when I was 9 years in the government, this feeling of connection to all the Jews of the world could be as strong as it is in the punishing cell. By the way, that's what my book, Never Alone, is about. But no doubt that there was some first moment, this first push, when you finally cross this life of doublethink, and when you feel yourself strong enough in your desire to return back to your people from this absolute assimilation and lies, that's when you say publicly, I don't want to be part of this world. I want to be part of Jewish people and the Jewish state. That was very dramatic change. Well, because physically, of course, it makes your life more difficult. But spiritually, for the first time, you're not lying. You know that there is no gap between what you feel and what you say. And that was such a deep, revealing feeling that I have to say that then for years when I was active, and I was threatened by KGB, when I was arrested, threatened to be sentenced to death, and many years in prison, the moment they try to convince you to have any compromise with them, you know that means that you will lose this world of freedom, this world of your people, or which you rediscovered and which makes your life so interesting, so deep. You don't really want it. So this initial moment, of course, was very important. And the second important moment in the first weeks of interrogation, when they were reminding you again and again that you'll be sentenced to death, and you understand that really it is frightening. And you have to cope with this, and you have to find the way to overcome this fear. And then you explain to yourself that there are things which don't depend on you, that whether you'll be physically, whether you'll survive or not, it depends on KGB. But there is one thing which depends fully on you. You're now a free person, and you're part of Jewish people in this historical struggle. It depends only on you if you'll remain a free person until the end. And that depends on you. And then the moment you change, they try to make your aim your physical survival. And you understand that your real aim is to remain a free person and part of your people. And that's the aim which depends on you, that you can reach it. Every day you're saying no to KGB and you fulfill all Taryag mitzvot. So it's a very comfortable life, by the way. It's much more difficult than daily life to fulfill Taryag mitzvot.
Okay, one more question. You talk about the sense of unity in the Jewish people. what do you think about the polarization of the Israeli society today? And how should our leadership address this?
Well, we have polarization of Israeli society today, but we also have polarization of Jews in America. We have serious polarization between Jews in Israel and Jews in the United States of America. And we all have polarization in general in the world. You in America today know what polarization means very well. I think, no, not only think, I deal with this a lot. We cannot expect from one another to be absolutely similar. After all, with all our desire to be the part of one historical journey, we make different choices. Those of us who live in Israel chose to live in Jewish democratic state in the Middle East surrounded by dictatorship. Those of us who decided to be part of American Jewish community chose to be minority, but in a liberal society which will not endanger Jewish survival in America. So we have different set of priorities of survival as Jewish people. But and that, by the way, it brings many misunderstandings. Sometimes we Israelis are very upset that American Jews don't, or many American Jews don't understand fully our security challenges. On the other hand, American Jews sometimes are very upset that Israelis don't appreciate now the need for different liberal forms of expressing their Judaism. You know what? As long as we remember, or as long as we want to be part of the same journey, and as long as we remind ourselves what is needed from us in order to be part of this journey, we are okay. So I am rather optimistic, though of course it needs from each of us practically every day to think what are the needs of other Jewish communities to survive as Jewish communities and what we can do to help them. What Israel can do to be the home for all the Jews of the world. It's not only enough to be physical home. You have to think how to make sure that every Jew in the world will feel comfortable spiritually in Israel. And when we think about it, we are making the right decisions. But the same I expect also from our brothers in diaspora.
Okay, thank you. Can we have one more, please? The last question is, Tikkun Olam often comes at the expense of Shalom Bayit. How does one balance this kind of dedication to the Jewish people, and what's the secret of the balance between the two?
Well, then probably I have to start my presentation from the very beginning, because, well, that is, I think, the maybe most important thing which I discovered in the Soviet Union in our struggle, that Tikkun Olam is a very Jewish desire to see the world a better place. And I hear from many American Jews in these days that many campuses, because that, well, we Jews had many problems, but now we are powerful people. Now we have to think about the Jews, or not Jews, the suffering of people in Africa, in Asia, and so on. And that's Tikkun Olam today. I am a good Jew if I'm concerned about the other people. And I am reminding them again and again our experience. If we really want to have strength to improve the world, it needs a lot of energy, a lot of determination, a lot of efforts. The source of this determination, energy, can be found only in your Jewish sources, only in your roots, only in your desire to continue that mission which Jewish people got from Har Sinai. So that's why those of us who feel that in order to be part of Tikkun Olam, of better world, I really have to stop thinking about myself as part of the tribe. They very quickly, they'll become powerless. They'll become assimilated. They will disappear, not only as the people, but as the source of energy which is changing this world. And that's why to be strong in your identity, that's the best way also to have strength to change the world for the better. And all the history of the struggle for Soviet Jewry is the best example of it.
Thank you. We're waiting for our next panelist, so we do have time for one more, if you could indulge us. Alex Levy asks, first of all, he recognizes you as an incredible person and great hero. He'd like to know, what do you think about interfaith dialogue and Jewish Israelis reaching out to Muslim citizens and other religions?
Well, look, I can tell that my first interfaith dialogue was in the Soviet Union and even in the Soviet prison. As the activist the founding member of Helsinki group, human rights group, I had to meet a lot with the Pentecostals who were persecuted and ran away to Siberia, but even there they were arrested for teaching their children to their faith, for priests in Lithuania, for Crimea Tatars, Muslims who were exiled from Crimea, and so on. But then in prison, it happened that one of my closest friends became Christian activist Vladimir Porosh. By the way, then in prison, I found out that you don't know who is KGB informant, who is not. But people who have strong identity like you, it's more probable that they're not KGB agents. Because like you, they have values for which they are ready to die for. And so it happened that one of my closest friends was Vladimir Porosh. And I was fighting to have my Sefer Tehillim. He was fighting to have his Bible, which was confiscated from him. And when we were lucky to get both the books, then we had our, as we called, Reagan's readings. By Reagan, because Reagan, that was the year which was declared by Reagan, year of the Bible. And it was like ecumenical readings. I'm reading from my Psalm book, he's reading from Old and New Testament, but in the end, our fight is the same fight for the freedom of individual, for the freedom of our people, for our right to be free in our faith. And it was a wonderful experience. So I have to say now, I do believe that most of Arab Israeli citizens, I worked with them as a minister, most of them want to live not only in peace with Israel, but enjoy this life of free, democratic Jewish state, and at the same time to have freedom of their freedom as Muslims. And I believe there is a huge potential in this, in deepening this dialogue, but which can be based only on the respect to one another's identity.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sharansky, Natan. We really appreciate your coming on and inspiring us before Shavuot. We look forward to your book coming out, and we hope when it does, you'll come and share with us again. And I'd like to thank on behalf of the whole Jewish people that you're a beacon of inspiration throughout the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chag Sameach, and a lot of health.
Thank you, Chag Sameach. Our next panelist is on. Sivan, thank you for coming on. And just a few words. Sivan, do we hear you? You hear us? So Sivan Rahav-Meir is a media personality and lecturer. She's married to Yedidia, the mother of 5, and lives in Jerusalem. And she was on Shlichut in the United States. With Grace is back home. Nice to have you here back home. And she works for Israel TV, columnist for Yedidia Achronot, has a weekly radio show on the Army radio, and her lectures are followed by thousands throughout the world. My wife listens to you every day, your WhatsApp. And thank you for coming. She was voted by Globe's newspaper as the most popular female media personality in Israel, and the Jerusalem Post one of 50 most influential Jews. So Sivan, thank you for coming.
exaggerating. Thank you. Thank you very much for exaggerating. Can you all hear me and see me? Is everything okay? Can we start? Do you hear me? Do you see me?
Yes.
Good.
Okay, thank you very much. So, speaking after Natan Sharansky, quite a challenge. Thank you very much. I think it's a meaningful event. 24 hours before we will receive the Torah once again, preparing ourselves through Zoom. I want to share, I'm not a Rebbitzin, I'm not a professor, I'm a journalist. I'm just a simple journalist, mother of 5. They're here somewhere, you know, it's a huge balagan, a huge mess right now. And we just came back from the States, from Israel, after 8 months of shlichut there. The Mizrahi movement sent us there for a year or 2. We came back, obviously, now. I want to share 3 stories. Maybe I should call them 3 scoops, 3 holy scoops. The stories I heard during the coronavirus crisis. And they touched me, and I hope they will touch and influence you too. As a journalist, as a curious person, I try to listen and then to post, publish, and share it with as many people as I can. The first story is just happened yesterday. Chabad Shlichim to Ukraine, the Wolf family, Avraham and Chaya, they're in touch with me. They tell me what's going on in their community. And they told me that since the shuls are still closed or, you know, half open, people can go in, but it's not the regular Shavuot. It's not a regular holiday. So what they did was opening shuls on the street for people. Since they can't invite the kids on Shavuot, there's a beautiful custom to bring all the kids, even the babies, to listen to Aseret HaDibrot, the 10 Commandments. We swear, we hear it once again every year, and we're devoted, connected, engaged. We listen to that portion of the Torah every year, and we receive it once again. It's a beautiful idea, but you can't bring the kids into the shul right now, obviously. So what do you do? As Chabad Shlichim, they're creative people, and what they did was opening like I would say sukkot, like a huge sukkah, a huge building they built, very big, very wide, in order to invite the kids there with, you know, social distancing, everything. They can stand separate and be like quite isolated, but still they can come and participate and be part of that project. Listen, the end of the day, the result will be they will listen to Aseret HaDibrot, and that's the main purpose. So they opened those buildings around the city, and they told me that yesterday 2 Jews came to them and said, "Wow, thank you, Rabbi, for reminding me of the fact Sukkot is coming. Yeah, it's the holiday of Sukkot. Don't worry, Rabbi. I will come for Arbaat Aminim. I will take the 4. Yeah, don't worry. Lulav." And they were shocked. I mean, Rabbi Wolf, he just spoke to me a few hours ago. He said, "I was so frustrated. I'm here as a shaliach for 20 years. These people are involved in our community. Seriously, they seriously think it's Sukkot coming up. They have no idea it's the month of Sivan and it's not Tishrei. What do they think? And where were they during Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur if it's Sukkot starting tomorrow?" And I told him, it's not frustrating, it's beautiful. The fact those 2 Jews know what Sukkot is, they see this building and they think about a holy day. It's beautiful, it's meaningful, but still I think it proves to all of us there's a lot of work we should still do together. The mission is not completed. The fact we're here celebrating Shavuot, let's see the rating. Oh, more than 100, and I think there are other people listening to us on in other ways. So we have a few hundreds English speakers from Israel and abroad here together. The fact that we're here is beautiful. We should have the whole Jewish people with us tonight. And some of them have no idea that we are about to receive the Torah tomorrow. They think maybe it's Sukkot. So I heard that story, you know, and I think it helped me realize, to get some perspective, since I spoke with so many communities, dozens of people in shuls all over the world, from Uganda, and there's a Jewish community in Uganda, to Thailand, to really all over the globe, Baruch Hashem, through Zoom. But it made me realize sometimes maybe I live in a bubble. It's a beautiful bubble, but it's a bubble of those who invite me, just like you. Great organizations, great people. Thank you for having that beautiful night, organizing everything. We should always remember those who think it's Sukkot tomorrow, and we should pay attention, take care, make them part of our circle. It's our mission. It's our obligation. This treasure we will receive tomorrow is not a personal treasure. It's not a personal, and we didn't receive, there's no VIP group that got, it's not our Torah. It belongs to those two Ukraine Jews who they know nothing, but it's their treasure too. So that's the first story, I think I wanted to share. Let's share like 2 more stories, and then I want to open it up for your questions and comments and things you might want to ask me, and no problem. The second story took place in New York. Uri Shechter from Gush Etzion in Israel, he shared it with me, and I published it, Baruch Hashem, all over the world. It was translated and published in many magazines and articles. People like to quote it. So what happened was, there was this old widow that had to celebrate the Pesach, the Seder night, Leil HaSeder, all by herself, all alone. Since in Hebrew, we don't say Leil HaSeder, we say Leil HaSeger, okay? We were all quarantined, obviously. And she was all alone, but her neighbor asked her, maybe you want us to open the door, and you will be able to be with us. You will be able to just hear us and feel like you're part of the celebration. Yetziat Mitzrayim, redemption, freedom. Let's do it together somehow. And she agreed. She said yes. She thanked him. He opened the door. On Chol HaMoed, her son calls her and asks his mother, the old widow, how was your Seder night? And she says, it was the best Seder ever since your father passed away. Since your father passed away, it was like the first time I felt he's with me. All the nigunim, all the melodies, the customs, the minhagim, everything was like so alive. I felt at home. It was my tune, all the nuances. It was so beautiful. And then her son says, whoa, now I understand. Now I realize your neighbor, he called me a week ago and he asked me, do I remember all the customs, all the nuances, everything I can recall, everything I remember from our Seder nights during our childhood. And he asked me to record our nusach. And that's what I did. And I sent him and he listened to it. He wanted you to feel comfortable. He wanted you to be part of that celebration and to feel like you're at home. So he changed his minhagim, his Seder night, in order to make you feel better. I'll tell you the truth. I published the story, but maybe as a journalist, I'm not supposed to say it. I had no idea if it's true, okay? It's a beautiful story. So, and this Shechter, he shared it with me. He said, I had no idea. I don't know what the source is. I don't know who's that neighbor, but it's a tale they tell in New York. Post it. 2 days later, brother, he gives me his name and I text him and he says, the story is true. Don't post my name. I don't want to, I want to stay anonymous, but that story is true. And I think it shows us that legends, still happen. It could be the smallest details, the smallest thing you do. Hashem watches, we watch, we can learn from that. Being sensitive, being creative. I would call it creative sensitivity or sensitive creativity, but being connected to other people to think. I think about this neighbor. I guess he had so many other urgent things to do during that crisis, but still, he was there. He was there for her. Okay. Third story. Hope it's okay. We landed in Israel. We landed in Israel a month and a half ago. We came back from the States. We were completely overwhelmed, shocked. It was really, really hard for us. Sorry, I don't want to complain. I'm really glad we came. But that was quite a shock, meaning we had all the plans, in the States. We had journeys of lectures everywhere. I was supposed to be in Boston right now, okay? And Palo Alto and everywhere. And so many plans, so many flights and were canceled and events and huge events and lectures. And, it's a shame, it's chaval. But you realize it's the right thing to do right now is to come back home. And that's what we did. And I remember we landed at the Ben Gurion airport. It was really scary. Those were the last days before the Seder night. People were really afraid and for good reasons. That was really scary. And we took this huge car. It was like a bus. We rented this bus to go to a certain place. We rented a place to be quarantined completely for 14 days, completely isolated. But on our way, we turned on the Israeli radio. And we heard the first headline on the news. And it said, Prime Minister Netanyahu will inform the public tonight at 8 o'clock, how can we celebrate Leil Seder safely in Israel? And the head of this hospital or that hospital and the heads of the Ministry of Health, they will be also available to help the people know what exactly should they do in a few days on Pesach. We looked at each other. No words were said, but we all felt the same. My husband Yedidia, me, our 5 kids were home. The whole world discusses the coronavirus right now. There's only one place in our huge, diverse globe where the main headline is not the coronavirus. The main headline is, how will we celebrate Pesach during the coronavirus? That's the question, because we're all worried about it. 9 million Israelis, the majority of the Jews, obviously, almost 100% of the Jews, they do something different during that holy night. So that's the main headline. And we just came back, after 8 months in the state as a tiny minority of Jews. Suddenly, that's the right pulse. It's a Jewish state. And we were so excited. I guess people were worried when they heard that news. But we got so excited. We're home. And we didn't have even to explain, the thoughts, the feelings. It was the right place for us. Maybe these stories are naive. Maybe there are small events, small things that took place. 2 Jews in Ukraine, 1 Jew in New York, 1 family coming back to Israel, listening to the radio. I do think they show part of that spirit. Erev Matan Torah. Okay, it's tomorrow. Last hours before we'll be there once again at Mount Sinai, at Har Sinai. I feel these stories might help us out, navigate and receive the Torah once again. I'll just say a few words just to conclude that part. And then, as I said, I'm available for your questions and comments. I watched the chat. I see what you text there. But I heard a beautiful idea. Rabbi Shalom Rosner from Bet Shemesh told me that it's our opportunity tomorrow to upgrade our unity, our achdut, or achdus, as you Americans, English, Anglos, they like to say it. My Ivris is awful, by the way. I can speak Ivrit or English, but the Ivris, that's the most complicated thing. How do they say? Chalice Shidduch? You know what it is? Chalice Shidduch. Anyway, let's stick to the Hebrew or English. So, tomorrow we have the opportunity to upgrade our unity, meaning this unity was beautiful. A lot of solidarity, a lot of arvut hadadit during the last 3 months. But that was unity out of fear, out of, there's a disease here. There's a huge, really scary virus. So we're together since we don't want to be sick. Okay. By the way, you also see it when there's like a terror attacks, wars, military operations, anti-Semitism all over the world. So I think we know how to be united when there's a threat, when there's an enemy, specific enemy. So we're like together since there's a negative reason why we see unity. But tomorrow we can upgrade this unity. to a positive unity. We go and we approach, we come to Har Sinai and we receive the Torah, not because of any worries. Nobody's chasing us. Nobody's threatening us. We're doing it out of love. Ahava v'lo yir'ah. Positive and not negative circumstances. We come there because we want to receive that Torah, those Aseret HaDibrot, those commandments. And I think once again, after this rehearsal of 3 months of negative unity, now, because Moshe Bar Simantov said, Netanyahu said, Litzman said, the doctors said, that's okay, they said, and we were united. Now, Hashem says, be united, since not because of you see a threat, because you're one nation with one story. You have a mission. You have this identity, shared story, shared treasure. It belongs to all of you. And we will all stand there tomorrow, and we will receive that treasure once again, Be'ezrat Hashem, out of positive unity. So thank you very much, and Toda Rabba for the opportunity. My English is quite broken. I now when I speak, I think about it. I haven't spoken like for 2 months. So excuse me if I make mistakes all the time, but it's part of the part of that package. We came back to Israel, and I hardly lecture in English. I do want to answer your questions and comments. We have a few minutes, so be my guest.
So one question from Oive.
Oive.
Sorry for the feedback. How do you deal with being a female journalist in the Orthodox Haredi world?
Yeah, somebody's muting me here all the time. I don't know what's the reason, but okay. So can you hear me now? Is it okay?
Because there's feedback.
Oh, now is it okay? So thank you, Oive, for watching me on Channel 12 News. Thank you. I hope you don't say Oive after my reports. I think it's a challenge. I mean, being a female Orthodox Chozeret B'Tshuva, I didn't grow up. I grew up completely secular. It's a challenge, but I love it. I mean, I love the fact I can influence other people. I'm not ashamed. In the past, I used to say, I'm objective. I'm just an objective journalist. This era is over. Nobody is an objective journalist anymore. It's not me. It's all of us. I mean, new media changed, old media. We can't claim, we're just objective people. We all have agendas, and that's okay. You're secular, I'm Orthodox, the right people, from the left to the right, conservative, liberal, it's okay. It's okay. Different types of Jews, religious Jews, diversity inside, Orthodoxy, it's okay. I mean, I have my opinions. Obviously, I'm right. I mean, that's, I'm convinced. But what can I tell you? There are other people, and I think it's a free world today, much, much freer than like a decade ago when we used to just be boring and objective. So today, I just, since I started just saying what I want to say, life became much, much easier, Baruch Hashem. And I think the public, I mean, the majority is not represented. I mean, when I come, I don't speak in the name of the religious Zionist or the Haredi world. I speak in the name, I think the majority of the Israeli people, they like their Judaism. They don't see their Judaism as a problem. They think it's a solution. And unfortunately, the media usually covers Judaism as a problem. So I'm there just I think, to balance the picture a little bit. But yeah, thank you very much. Okay, do you want me to I see we have a few other questions. Do you want to read them out loud, or you want me to do it?
Go ahead, there's feedback. You go, you read.
Okay, no, I'll interview myself, no problem. I'll choose the good question. Wait a minute. Thank you for all the thanks yous. Okay, how was I received and by the broader Jewish community in the States? Okay, and wait a minute. Okay. Okay, I'll tell you something. Once again, the communities there are great. We can learn a lot from them. I must tell you, the way they built their shuls, their centers of identity, these are empires of identity. We can learn so much from the Jewish schools, although things are so different there because of the tuition. I mean, it's expensive. I think, okay, maybe I'll tell you what's the best thing and what's the worst thing I discovered there. So the best thing is obviously, I would say, the Jewish, really the sense of community. I mean, you're much more involved when you are there. In each shul, you have like a rabbi, assistant rabbi, youth coordinator, all those people. In Israel, my husband just went he davens mincha. I don't even know where. He just went to Arvit here. I don't even know which shul. I mean, we're not so communal in a way. I mean, we don't pay, and we don't have that sense of community like we live in Yerushalayim, in Tel Aviv. It's different. People invest a lot of time, money, efforts, energy in building those communities, and it's important. We can learn from that. But the other thing, and that's I think the worst thing is, and you know what? It reminds me of the first story. It's expensive to be a Jew, and that's impossible. It's impossible to say if you want to be an engaged Jew in the States, basically you should be very, very, very rich. Very, very rich. Look at the tuition in private schools, great schools. But I want to tell you something. This format is not sustainable. I mean, no wonder only like 10% of the Jews, they send their kids to those schools. Obviously, public schools are free and Jewish schools are so expensive. I speak about it with people there. They all agree. So I tell them, why don't you change it? I don't know. You know, I'm not the leader there, but I want to tell you, I will even use the word crazy. It's crazy. People tell me, I can't send my kid to this school. Okay, he'll go to a public school. Are you crazy? It means most of the kids who go there will assimilate at the end of the day. So something should be different. And unfortunately, this year, we don't even have the camps. The camps are part of the cure, the remedy, since the kids can go, in the summer to have part of that identity. And that's really sad that most of the camps are closed this year. Okay. They told me not to be Israeli and to stop at 8:30.
Well,
so,
we're waiting for our next panelist. So if you'd like to take, I would ask you a question, which is, here's our next panelist. Here. So thank you, Sivan. Thank you so much for joining us. And keep up the message and your impact on so much of Israeli society. It's wonderful. Toda rabba.
Thank you for organizing that beautiful evening. Toda rabba. And may we receive the Torah tomorrow with happiness and joy. Toda.
Rabbi, good evening and post Chag Sameach. Thank you, Sivan.
I've got Dr. Sivan, can you? I've got Dr. Alana Heidemann.
Can't hear you.
Okay.
Hi, hello everyone, and thank you so much for allowing me to have the honor of introducing John Medved. To Israeli venture capitalist John Medved, the founder and CEO of Our Crowd, one of Israel's most active venture capital companies. It's not all about IPOs and exits and making money. It is also, perhaps even primarily, about helping humanity. Medved has been raising capital around the world for Israeli startups and charitable causes, the Jewish people, but as an opportunity to share in and profit from a voyage of discovery by getting in on the ground floor. Interestingly enough, he himself has said that it's Israel's destiny to provide answers to world issues. That's our story. And that his job is to connect people around the world to the Israel story, and it just keeps getting better. So John Medved, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for this very special learning opportunity with you.
And is it possible that you could enable my screen sharing? Because I have slides, and when I'm trying to click share screen, it says it's been disabled by host.
Okay, we'll ask.
So it's enabled. It's enabled now. Here we go.
Okay.
Can you see that? Great. Good. Thank you. Just a quick comment. What's the connection between Startup Nation and Shavuot? Well, it's interesting. I learned a chazal a long time ago where there was a debate about, it's an obvious debate about why the Jews, why do we get the Torah? And we've heard many various versions of the story. The one that I liked the most was when chazal said, I know why, because azin hen, because the Jews were daring, courageous, from Lashon, Oz. And another Chazal comes up to him and says, no, 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 not azin hen, chatzufin hen, that we were chutzpahdik, that we had chutzpah. And clearly, for this chutzpah to take proper shape in our time, it is about startups and about daring this little country to have a huge, completely out of scale impact on the world. And I'm going to take you through a quick little tour of our impact on this COVID-19 crisis. Let's start with how we're doing. Remarkably enough, Israel has weathered the storm quite well. It's hard to say 280 deaths as well, but take a look at New Jersey, where Sivan just came from. Okay, they're a little bit smaller population than we are. And while we have 280 deaths, they have 11,000 plus. And look at the number of cases, almost 10 times our cases. If you look at how we rank to other countries in the OECD, the sort of elite rank of major economies, Israel is really doing very, very well. And just look at the graph, and you can see that we're, thank God, futfu, let's all, maintain our social distancing. We're on the other side of this curve. And in fact, this is from 2 days ago. The articles have just gotten, it's even getting hard to find the information on how many cases because it's no longer news. This is not our first pandemic, right? The world has experienced pandemics for a long time. It's actually rather shocking how unprepared we were. And unfortunately, this is not going to be the last pandemic. And the question is, who's going to respond and who's best prepared to lead humanity out of these crises? And it's got to be Israel. Now, in the old days, I would have to show slides from the foreign ministry or from some kind of Zionist organization. Now I just let the people from Davos, the World Economic Forum, do the work for me. And literally, what's remarkable is how they're ranking Israel today in terms of number 1 in growth of innovative companies, number 2 in venture capital availability after the US, number 1 in entrepreneurial culture, in companies embracing disruptive ideas. It's quite remarkable how Israel fares in the world. And you look at it in numbers and you see that all the way through last quarter, these numbers were extraordinary. Okay, if you look at what happened on an annual basis, you'll see that last year was over $8 billion invested in startups here in Israel. Last quarter was 2.7. We were on track for 10 plus before the crisis hit. Now, to give you a sizing experiment, like how much does this represent? Well, realize that if you take all of the Jewish charitable contributions, all the bonds, all the Jewish agency, and I know we've heard from Isaac Herzog, incredible work going on there, and Natan Sharansky. You take all of that charity, which represents about $3 billion. You take all of the U.S. government defense aid, which is about $3.7 billion, and you don't get to this number. So that this number now represents perhaps the most important form of foreign investment. In fact, of that $2.7 billion in the first quarter, 93% came from abroad. Now that's something you can be very, very proud of until you realize that, there's a crisis on the way. Because in the old days, by the way, we were selling companies for hundreds of millions of dollars. Now Israel is selling its companies for billions of dollars, except that the startup index has been hit horribly. Okay, it's not just the stock market which took a hit, but startups are also taking a terrible hit in terms of both number of deals, the deal amounts, first financing down by almost 2/3. And this is a horrible news for Startup Nation, given the fact that 93% of the funding came from abroad. Not to mention the fact that they really can't just hop on a plane and come here and close a deal anymore. If you look at what will be this time around, there were prior crises where all kinds of metrics were down terrible. We're hoping this time it won't be so bad, except you look at the unemployment figures and you realize that we're really up against a tough challenge. And when you talk about what the recovery will look like, people debate whether it will be quick in a V or slow in a U or wavy in a W or chas v'shalom, okay, staying low in the dreaded L. I believe very much in the Y, which is a 2-track. It's a Y on its side. Okay, you got to, look a little hard to understand that Y.
Is it?
Okay, and so if you look at this Y, you realize that the V part of it, the one that's going back up fast, is the digital economy, is the strong economy, is, I dare say, Israel in its recovery. Whereas the slower branch, which looks more like a U, is going to be more of the traditional economy that's been body blown, if you will, gotten a real gut punch, okay, in hotels and airlines and in tourism. And in fact, if you look at how the 5 major tech stocks have performed, the FANG, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google, they have done a V so far. They've not only recovered, they're up since the crisis hit, whereas the traditional S&P is looking more like a U, actually a little scary like an L. Let's hope it picks up. So what's going on with trends, right? The trends that we're seeing today are not trends that just started now, right? Working from home, distance learning, e-commerce, robotic process automation. These were things that started years ago, except they entered warp speed in the last couple of weeks. In fact, if you listen to Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, he said, look, we've seen 2 years of digital transformation in the last 2 months. And in fact, when you start seeing headlines like Twitter and Facebook saying, plan to work from home forever, you realize that change is very, very significant at this moment in time. And we believe that the need for investment in this new normal is very important, not just in terms of future pandemic medical issues, such as vaccines, or treatment and healing, such as therapeutics, but also about food security, distance learning. These are areas that really need investment attention. There are winners and there are losers and something in between. The winners are everything that relates to this new normal and the healthcare arena. The losers, unfortunately, the oil industry, commercial real estate, and a bunch of people in the middle. What's going to drive us forward is going to be AI, artificial intelligence. And luckily, Israel is one of the 3 leading countries in the world with AI driving us. And if you look at what Israel is doing in the crisis, it's remarkable. There are dozens of Israeli companies doing testing. This is just a sample. And whether it's saliva, breathalyzer, the new Yan Shuf, they're incredible. In terms of therapeutics, you're hearing all the time, almost every day, about a new therapeutic project here in the country. Ventilators, literally a dozen projects here on ventilators. And of course, vaccine. And what's remarkable about what Israel's doing on the vaccine is that we have 4 of the world's 100 projects that really have a good chance. 4. Now, if you look recently at what our percentage of the world population is, it isn't 4%. I wish it was, okay? But we're basically about, an order of magnitude, over indicated here. And we're very proud to have backed what we think is one of Israel's leading vaccine programs from Migvax. Migvax is a group that spun out of a research institute in the north called Migal, up in Kiryat Shmona. And believe it or not, for the last 4 years, they had been working on the chicken virus problem. They basically were tasked by the government to heal our chickens so that we will not, face a culling of these flocks. And then they realized that they could take this vaccine they had developed and actually devote it to the human coronavirus, because the virus that was attacking the chickens was also a coronavirus. Wouldn't it be an amazing story that Israel heals the world from chicken soup? Jewish penicillin, it's not quite soup, but the fact that it came from chickens excites me, and I'm hoping we win. And by the way, whoever wins, humanity wins, and that's a good thing. The advantage of this approach is it's oral, so it doesn't require a shot, doesn't use live or dead virus. It's going to be low cost, which is important so we can actually provide it to the rest of the world, and it's a platform, so it's ready for mutations. There are other companies that work here, such as Site Diagnostics, who have actually been dubbed the anti-Theranos. These are the guys who use 2 drops of blood and give you a digital complete blood count in literally 10 minutes. And this is important not just for COVID patients, but also so you can take chemotherapy, to the field so that cancer patients don't have to go to the hospital. Home One is making a desktop lung function tester.
Okay, everybody.
Can someone please?
All right, everybody.
Okay. This company is going to unfortunately have a lot of business. I mean, unfortunately for the humanity, good for us as investors, because those patients who've recovered from the coronavirus are going to have a lot of lung impairments, unfortunately, and they need to be tested in new ways. TytoCare provides the ability to actually get clinical grade diagnostics remotely. You can actually stick something in your child's ear without fear of perforating it. Why? Because it actually uses artificial intelligence to tell you where to locate it and when to stop. You can do the same in the throat, in the nose, in the lungs, and the heart, and then this can be transmitted not just live to a doctor, but to an AI. And this was used at Sheba and is being used in hospitals all over the world, so you can do this essentially shelter in place and still get proper medical care. Cryon has developed a robotic process automation tool that allows software bots to write the code. They were used by Maccabi and Kupat Cholim Klalit, who used this to hook up their COVID data to their databases. They were told that it would take them months of effort with their traditional coding methods. These guys did it in 48 hours over Shabbat, because I think you're allowed to let bots do the work on Shabbat. I'll have to ask the rabbi later. And that was really quite remarkable. Intuition Robotics, which makes this incredible robot called EliQ, which doesn't respond just to specific commands like Siri or Alexa. You can talk and you can ramble. So it's perfect for 80 and 90-year-olds who have unfortunately been even more lonely than before. And they need to be connected and reminded to drink and to take their temperature. And that's what EliQ has been doing for its patients. MeMed is helping governments. In fact, its largest project sponsor is the US Defense Department. And it has an ability to study immune response such that it can probably make the earliest detection of COVID infection in the world, we think. And it's a remarkable company. VocalZoom, doing an array of sensors, contactless, that will allow you to go to an airport and not just get a temperature sensing, but also what's going on in your lungs. I don't want to even go into how much detail it is, but it's a remarkable sensor array, which will be deployed soon at airports. Sweech, managing the disease. They started by managing diabetes and then oncology, and now they're doing it for COVID-19. Barcode, nano-encapsulating drugs or RNA or mRNA such that you can actually speed up these PCR tests by 100-fold times. Texi, allowing remote assistance to go on in your home if your internet goes out or your TV goes out. Unfortunately, under lockdown, you can't bring a technician in, but now you can do it through AI and through your phone. And it's being used by Verizon and by Vodafone. and Cyber MDX, most importantly, helping us keep our hospitals and our medical devices safe. Because unfortunately, over the next several months and years, we expect that hackers are going to take control of ventilators or pacemakers and send ransom notes that will say, you've got 30 minutes to live unless you pay it off. And these guys are on the job to prevent that from happening. And finally, Sense Education, who are doing remote educational testing. And there were as many as 1.5 billion students out of school. And this remote education is a very important topic. So this is just a little sample of our portfolio, of my portfolio, of what we're investing in at our crowd. If you want to get a sense of how much is going on in Israel, at Startup Nation Central, they have a central repository of all the companies that are fighting Corona. There are hundreds of them in this country. And we should all be very proud, because the reality is that this is our destiny, right? We are not supposed to be just another country. In Zionism, there was always this debate, are we kechol ha'amim or are we or l'goyim? And in my opinion, I've always been a fan of Achad Ha'am, and the fact that even as, you know, if you're taking a non-religious standpoint, and I take a religious standpoint, we have a special mission and calling. And people say, well, wait a minute, how is it that this little country does all of this? And I shoot it back to them and say, wait a minute, you know what? If the Jewish state didn't punch out of its weight class in business, in innovation, that would be the surprise. Because when you have a world where 30% of the Nobel Prizes in the sciences were awarded to Jews, or where 20 or 30% of the world's billionaires are Jews, and I know we don't want to talk about it because we're afraid of anti-Semites, we should be proud of it. When you realize how many Jews have written great plays or have developed great movies or great real estate, our people create. We believe in being partners with Hashem in creation, that it's not done. And so it's in moments of these, when we're facing a crisis, where we get moving. Some people get caught. Some people go into the fright and flight, and eventually they get to the fighting. We start fighting right away. And I am extraordinarily proud of how our country and our people have responded to this unprecedented crisis. I think in many ways it's one of our finest moments. And I'm delighted to answer any questions you might have to take this into a little bit of a more interactive process. Let me see if I can see if there are any questions either in the
we have a couple, John. We have a couple of questions on the chat already. You want me to read them to you?
I see it, yeah.
Okay.
Why are we so entrepreneurial? And the answer is because of our culture. I believe that Jews have always been entrepreneurial, right? In other words, Abraham was, we don't worship poverty. There's nothing inherently cool in Yiddishkeit about being poor, okay? If you look at our Avot, Abraham was heavy in flocks. Okay, Yitzchak was one of the great hydrologists. Yaakov was the first biotechnologist with the maklot. We've always been entrepreneurial from the beginning. And it is in our genes, it's in our culture. And I think that, by the way, there's another question here about what is the role of our closeness to the US? And it's a very important role, because the US is still the leader in innovation as a country in the world. And the fact that we're so close, just look at where our infections came from. 70% of our coronavirus came from the US. We're close to the US. And my sense is that our vibrant startup scene will stay this way for quite some time. And I'm very excited about the younger generation. There's another question. Why do we think that some of the powerful drugs and vaccines that Israel's creating doesn't get enough play? Look, we have not been good at investing in biotech here in particular. In the US, there's the NIH, which provides a lot of funding to get drugs ready for investment. There's a very big investment community there for biotech investments. Here, there literally are only 5 medical funds. We've underinvested here. We have always invested in semiconductors and cybersecurity and artificial intelligence and IT in general. But now people, and it's interesting, you're watching traditional venture capital funds move over into the medical space, and I believe that we will get more backing here in that area. And I think that these stories will get out there. I think the world appreciates Israel today in a way that, like never before. I know that we typically like to beat ourselves up and say, oh, anti-Semitism, but there is a huge amount of philo-Semitism out there. I see it all the time. I'm involved with 50,000 investors on the Our Crowd platform, and believe me, they're not anti-Semites. Okay, majority of them, by the way, are not Jewish, and they are very, very interested and connected, attached to what's going on here in Israel. And I believe that that's a trend which is growing. I'm getting a question, if Israel does such amazing work, why is it the poorest country in the OECD? The answer is it's not the poorest country. I don't know what, Sam, metric you're looking at. If you're looking at things like our inequality, we are very unequal on the Gini index, means that there are some people here are very wealthy and many who are not. And we have to work on that problem. The problem we have, though, with inequality is that we have huge non-reported income communities. And I'm not going to name names, but you know who they are. And, if you drive through some of these villages, you don't see tremendous hunger. But the last time you got a tax receipt from some people is not that often. So I think that Israel, by the way, has lots to do, okay, in terms of providing a more equal and more accessible entry into the startup nation story. There are only 300,000 people, by the way, working in the tech community, but for each of them, there are several jobs that are supporting them. There's another question about how can small investors get involved here? And the answer is a little self-serving, I guess. We have a platform called Our Crowd, and there are others, and you can certainly find them. But if you go to ourcrowd.com, you can actually find investment opportunities. You have to be an accredited investor, which means that you have to meet the regulations here in Israel or in the US, and the minimum investments start at $10,000. So it's not really a small investor with hundreds of dollars. I hope someday we can do that. I'm amazed by Israel's innovations. Perhaps this issue of lech lecha, stepping out of your comfort zone, was the beginning. Absolutely. Okay, I mean, I think Jews, it's the combination of chutzpah, of feeling insecure, of being insecure, of realizing that, I think that for me, that one of the things which gets me going in the morning is that I know that no matter when my time is up, I provided a link here in this huge story, and that we get a benefit by being part of this story, which started before Sinai, okay, and got its peak at Sinai and is going forward. And then when you look at this ridiculously small people, okay, how many of us are there? 15 million, want to be generous and count differently. It's absurd, okay? It's a fraction of a fraction. And yet you look at what we're doing, and what I find impossible is how people who are outside of communal involvement and excitement aren't moved by that. Why someone who's born into this rich tradition wants to put themselves outside of it. Unfortunately, many of us are simply, not educated as kids. I was one of them. I grew up in a, public school and in a very assimilated community in Southern California, where because we had a Seder, we were considered fanatics. That shows you how assimilated that was. I went to Berkeley, which was not the most hospitable place for Jewish identity, and ended up here. My kids got a different education. And I think that we should all just be incredibly proud to be part of this story. Today, it's more apparent than normal when you look at what we're doing with this crisis, but we do this all the time. The Jews are playing a hugely positive role, and let's hope that what Sivan said earlier about the fact that we'll reunite in a positive, through love, unity, the Amachad, Ish Echad Lev Echad, okay, at Shavuot, rededicate ourselves to our nation, to our calling, to our God, and somehow connect that to what we do for the overall world. And again, I appreciated being asked. I'm sort of humbled by the people who I'm sharing this Zoom with, and I appreciate you having listened to me tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, John. We appreciate your coming on, and keep up the good work and building the Jewish people, building the land of Israel, and exciting things to come in the future. Look forward to that why panning out, or panning up.
Amen. Thank you.
Okay, I see that Racheli is on. Racheli, you there? Shalom. Thank you for joining us. Racheli Sprecher Frenkel was born and raised in Israel. She is a Yoetzet Halacha, which is very special. It's a new, relatively new role in the community of women who are educated in Torah and can serve to give advice and direction for Jewish women. She teaches Talmud and Halacha at Nishmat Seminary for Women and is the director of Matan's Advanced Halacha program. She is the co-founder of the Jews from Unity Prize and Unity Day Project, and she is the mother of 7 and lives with her family in Nof Ayalon. And tragically, in 2018, her son Naftali, along with Gilad Sha'er and Eyal Yifrach, were the 3 boys kidnapped and murdered by terrorists. And subsequent to that, Racheli was a source of strength for Israel, for the Jewish people. She came and shared with people how she got through it, and everyone was inspired by her. And you continue to teach Torah and inspire people. Thank you for joining us.
Hi. I understand that the main goal of introductions is to embarrass you, but I must say, in 2014, it was us that got all the strength from everybody else and all the support. And if there's something that is coming from us, it's just a reflection of everything we have received and still are receiving. Let me ask you, how's the sound? Because sometimes if you think the sound isn't good enough,
If you can make it a little louder.
Okay, yes. So I'll use the funny stuff. Okay, great. So we were debating what we're going to talk about, and it's going to be kind of a freestyle. I hope you don't mind. The truth is, this Zoom thing became very crazy because it's, on Shavuot, if you stay up all night, you might be, if you're in the field of Torah, you might be running around between a few shuls giving Torah classes. But because it's a holiday, you don't take your car anywhere. So, it's a small, somewhere in the neighborhood, you might be walking an hour for the next class. But on these pre-Shavuot Zoom sessions, we hop around from Australia to South Africa to London to Kiryat Shmona and Yerushalayim, and unbelievable. So almost Chag Sameach. And I know there's, the problem with Zoom is you don't really know who you're talking to, but I know some of you are people that made Aliyah and are, are part of the English track of the Tikkun Gadol, and the others are, all over the place, but it's not part of the general topic, just to tell you, you know, I really, it comes from a place of self-doubt, okay? I don't know if I would have the power today to pick myself up from a comfortable life in New York or Johannesburg, whatever it is. You know, it's less comfortable in Corona days, and we're doing Baruch Hashem quite well here, but I don't know if I could do what you're doing and make the changes and the change of language and the bureaucracy and the, you know, get used to Israeli culture or lack thereof. I really have endless appreciation, and I wanted to tell you that my parents made Aliyah. I was born in Israel, so what you get as far as my English, it's far from perfect, but we'll do. My parents came here 1955, okay? Many years before I was born. And there isn't a day that goes by that I don't thank them for doing this for me. For having me grow up in Israel, for raising my children in Israel. And it's the greatest gift, really, it's the greatest gift. So if there's anybody there that's, you know, going through difficult, tense time and he doesn't know if he made the right decision, and, you know, the kids are taking it difficult, you know, all those stages, I just want to just strengthen you with the knowledge that you're giving your children the greatest gift in the world. And whether it's your children now or your future children. So sorry, I was told that some of the people we're talking to are Olim, and I have such admiration for them that I couldn't help but say this. Okay, Shavuot. What do you want to do for Shavuot? I'll start by just sharing one of my favorite midrashim or agadah. Those are stories of the Talmud. Not of the main Talmud, the Talmud that came from Babylon, but the Jerusalem Talmud, the Talmud that was created in Eretz Israel. There's a picture there of, you know, the portrayed of the moment that all of history was, you know, driven to, the moment where finally there'll be some kind of connection, some kind of kiss between the eternal and the divine and the mortal and the, you know, flesh and blood. And the picture that they're drawing there is of the moment that the tablets, Luchot HaBrit, are given to Moshe Rabbeinu. And I'm allowed to say Moshe, not Moses, right? I always, when I come to a community, I ask, is this a Moses community or a Moshe community? So this is very graphic, and it's actually anthropomorphic or something like that, when you those instances where they portray God in a bodily image for the sake of passing on an idea. So in that portrayal, Moshe, the height of the luchot is 9 tfachim, 9 fists, okay? And Moshe Rabbeinu is holding 3 tfachim from the bottom, and God is holding 3 tfachim from the top. And there are 3 in between. And it's exactly that moment of kiss, of connection, of heaven and earth. It's, you know, it's like the Leonardo da Vinci when they finally touch. And right then, there's noise from down under. And, you know, they look down, and it's what we call chet ha'egel. It's the sin of the calf. It's, in the sages describe it as something nasty happening while the bride or groom are still under the chuppah, okay? You know, it's while things are happening, already something's going wrong. And they hear the noise, they look down, they see what happened, there's idol worship right under Sinai, and the reflexive response of God, and again, excuse the human terms, is to pull back the tablets. And he pulls, and then Moshe Rabbeinu hangs down on the bottom, and he pulls it down. And there's I think the expression is a tug war, you know, what God pulling from one end and Moshe from the other, and there's a tension. Who's gonna win? Well, I'm not sure it's such a fair fight. eventually we know that the tablets, Luchot Brit, stay in Moshe's hands. So obviously, well, God must have, let go. And the question is, what was it that made God let go? Okay, and that's already not part of the description in the Talmud, but commentaries look at it and they say, the thing about Moshe was the fact that he had nothing to lose. He at this point in time, he felt incomplete without the Torah that was already given to him. And he put all that effort, all that, his whole heart and soul in trying to hold it down, because he couldn't without it. It was already, too late to retract. And then when God sees the effort, sees the desire, sees the passion, then he lets go. And he says, okay, you can have it. And it's very similar to a scene in the Megillat Ruth that we read on Shavuot, the story of Ruth, where there's a part there where Ruth and her, actually Naomi, the mother-in-law, and her two, the widows of her sons, walk towards Eretz Israel, and Naomi tells them, stay at home. I have nothing to offer you. I have no more sons for you to marry. You're not going to have kids through me. Stay here, stay here. And Orpa at some point says, thank you, I love you, you were great to me, kisses her goodbye and walks away. And Ruth insists and insists and insists. And at a certain point, Naomi lets go. Naomi says, okay, come along. And the verse in Ruth that describes that part is when V'terek hi mit'ametzet hi lavo, when Naomi saw that Ruth is trying so hard, that she's putting an effort into it, that it reflected her desire, she was heart and soul into it. So she said, okay, I accept, and you can come along with me. And the end of Ruth is the beginning of David HaMelech, and according to tradition of redemption and Messiah. So that's just a favorite picture of mine of around Sinai and Matan Torah. One of the side questions from this, and you know what? I'll just tell you an anecdote. A lot of Jews study a page a day of Talmud. It's called Daf Yomi, and it takes about 7.5 years to finish the whole Shas, the whole Talmud Bavli. And we just recently, a few months ago, we had great celebrations where Jews from all over the world, that after an effort of 7.5 years, finished the whole Talmud. And it was the first time that there was a tremendous, like a huge celebration by women that celebrated Siyum HaShas. And it was the women learning Torah is quite a new phenomenon. It's a few decades, but it's growing and it's still novel. And women finishing all Talmud Bavli is quite a rare occasion. And there were only, I'd say, maybe 100 women that actually finished all of the Talmud, but there were 4,000 women coming to celebrate with them. And then we mentioned that story we just said about what made HaKadosh Baruch Hu gift eventually the Torah to Moshe, because he felt that he can't do without it. And we said, you know what? Maybe we got to that stage where our effort and our passion will buy Torah for us because we want it so badly, because we feel incomplete without it. But that's just a side comment. Really the question, one of the questions is, so there's such a peak experience like Sinai, yeah? And we're so human, we're so mortal, we're so flawed that while Sinai is going on, there's already, sinning and idol worship down there. And then there's, everyday life. And the question is, what is the meaning of those peak experiences? When, that's not life itself. Life itself is way down there. To me, I'll tell you again a personal story. the rabbi mentioned that my son was kidnapped and murdered with Eyal and Gilad. And when they were finally found and recovered and brought home, and thank God we got to bury them together in Modi'in, there was a huge funeral. 100,000 people came. And a friend of mine met the next day, Natan Sharansky. Natan Sharansky was a refusenik. He was in the Soviet Gulag for 9 years.
Spoke for us earlier, Racheli.
Oh, wow. Okay, great. So I don't have to say who Sharansky is. Did he give you the spiel about what quarantine means?
No, he was...
Recently, he was so amazing. He's such a terrific person. Recently, he put out this little movie about people, in Corona time that are quarantined in their rooms and in their homes. And he said, I'm an expert in that. I'll tell you how to live with it. And he spoke about control and about the sense of humor and amazing stuff. Anyhow, the day after our son's funeral, a friend of mine met Natan Sharansky, and Natan said, yesterday at the funeral, I felt it was like Matan Torah at Sinai, because we say about Sinai that all the souls of all the generations were there. There's even a verse that refers to those that are with us here today and those that are not physically here, but they're also here in Sinai. And he said, I felt like that. There were 100,000 people there in body, physically, and there were millions of people, Jews around the world, also there with soul, coming along. And when I was told that quote of Natan, I was thinking, goodness, a comparison to Matan Torah. So what's the Torah that comes out of it? And I think part of it is, if we need another resemblance, is in Sinai we speak a lot about the unity that was, I heard the previous speaker quote Sivan. I didn't hear Sivan, but Sivan probably spoke in length about this concept of Ke'ish echad belev echad, that people were standing around the mountain in singular sense, and like one person with one heart. And something of that happened around the whole events of the summer of 2014. And again, you ask yourself, but what's the meaning of such peak events if, shortly thereafter, life happens. I remember just a few months after this unbelievable unity, there was an election in Israel, and another election, but around the election, you know how people behave. It's been that way in America for the last 2 years too. All the filth comes out, and it was heartbreaking because where did all that unity go? How did this happen? And you ask yourself, so what? Was it all an illusion? And a lot of it is saying to yourself, peak events. They set the standard. They tell you what you're capable of. It's a how do you say, a forming moment where you understand that you could, at least theoretically, be there. It doesn't mean that every day is going to look like that, but it says something about capability. It says something about maybe where your high vision of yourself could be at. And we met people from communities around the world, and they kept on saying the same thing. They said, during those times, a miracle happened to us. We stood together in prayer and in rallies and then in memorials, and we were standing Reform and conservative and Reconstructionist and the Israelis and the non-affiliated Jews and Orthodox and ultra-Orthodox. And the elders of the community never recall such a thing. Maybe in the 6-Day War, or when the unification of Jerusalem. And again, it doesn't carry on to everyday life. That's the art, to take some of it to our everyday existence, to our deep recognition of connection. But it happens once in a while to let you know that there's something to strive for. Hopefully not only around tragedies and things like that. There's a similar idea in now Shavuot is one of the 3 great holidays, Shloshet HaRegalim. And during Shloshet HaRegalim, everybody would go up to Jerusalem from a very, very large area around, and there were Israel Chaverim, that literally means all of Israel are friends, and it's often used to say we're connected, etc. But really, its legal meaning is that all of Israel at this time of the holiday, when they all come to Jerusalem, are all considered in halachic terms, as far as Jewish law, trustworthy in very specific laws that pertain to food, to drink, and for this short time that they're together in Jerusalem, like is going to be in Shavuot, you can eat from anybody's meal. You can drink from anybody's dishes. Otherwise, Chavarim was a very, very elite and strict group, and during these holidays, everything would open up, and you could trust everybody, and you could break bread together. This expression, breaking bread together, it's more than just we sat down to eat. We felt the connection. We shared a meal. We often feel the awkwardness that sometimes happens when you're not able to share a meal. And again, you ask, yeah, it's amazing, it's wonderful. In Yerushalayim, ha'ir she'osa kol Yisrael chaverim, the city that connects everybody together. We break bread together, we sit together in Shavuot. But 2 minutes later, we're going to be back here in Modi'in or wherever, and we're not gonna use the same dishes. We're not gonna eat the same food. What did that help? But I think there's something deep here. These experiences where for a while there, we sat down, we looked at each other's eyes, we spoke, we listened, we shared a meal. They do walk with us. And even if in everyday life, life is complicated. There are a lot of things to take into consideration. I would still remember that we sat together at that point, that we're connected. One of the projects where we became involved with is Unity Day and Unity Prize. Things that try to do as little as you can to connect people from different parts of Israeli society and the Jewish walks of life. And at some point, we were in a city in New York, and the people from the city decided that in honor of Unity Day, they're going to try to eat a Shabbat meal together. Now, it was a reform, I don't know what's what, but there's a synagogue, a temple, a shul, a shtibel, the whole bunch. So there was a reform one and a conservative one and a reconstructionist one. I have to learn how to pronounce that. And 2 Orthodox shuls and a few unaffiliated Jews. And they came together for a Shabbat meal. And, it's complicated. This hechsher, that hechsher, how are you going to trust each other's kosher? 300 people in a hall on Shabbat, are you going to use a microphone? You're not going to use a microphone. Will you allow a separate prayer service in the reform hall? Everybody has to compromise and connect. And they invited us. And I was there with them in the meal, and you heard people say, I lived down the block from you for 15 years, but I never stopped to say hello or shalom. even though, you know, I know you're Jewish, I'm Jewish, because you're from the temple and I'm from the shul. I heard people say there was a pillar of their community that had passed away that summer, and he cared very much about you know, Jews keeping together. And he said, the people there said, if he only would have seen us eating this meal together. Now, you'd say, okay, it's just a meal. But there's something about changing the perspective, about sometimes the peak events are life-changing, they really give you a sense of what could be. And again, very relevant, you know, high holidays, Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah, or the giving of Torah and Sinai. Those are moments of elevation. But what do I take from them? Before you used the word that's always very touchy for me, you said inspiration. And I know it's I don't know what to do with that word. You know, what does it mean? What does it? And then I met someone in Riverdale who told me that he had met Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz on the street. Now, Rav Adin is a great Torah scholar, and he translated all the Talmud from Aramaic to Hebrew, and then there was also in English a huge Torah project, and also a few personal books. And this guy was so excited. He walks over to Rav Steinsaltz, and he says, Rabbi, I read your book. It was so inspirational. And Rav Adin, who's a bit of a cynic, turns to him and he said, really? It inspired you to do what? So a lot of time, you know, Corona days are, you know, they're not just a lesson in inspiration, like often we try to take something from it, but there's also a lot of pain and hardship and losses and tragedies. But if, you know, the question of what will we take with us from it, if and when it's asked, it has to be very specific. It has to be translated into small but meaningful decisions. You know, if you suddenly discovered your kids, you know, they're not just these things coming in and out. You actually spend time together. Maybe there's something we can do about it. If you could discover the books, if you discovered the ways to reach out to people that are in trouble, how can we take? And really, the truth is, I'm not preaching to you. I'm preaching to myself. How can we be very, you know, modest and specific, and walk with this on? So if I have like the last 2 minutes to think what I want to take from this, it's the idea that it's all about the desire and the mitametzit, the effort. It's about peak events that serve, well, I have to use that word again, inspiration. They serve as a guide, as a measure of our capabilities, and also of some kind of a base that walks with us. You know, even a one-time experience, it laid a layer of connection, of recognition. And then, of course, it can't just a fluffy inspiration. It has to be translated into you know, modest but practical, I'd say, ideas, a decision, or things that stay with us. Yeah, I think I don't want to. We have a minute. A minute is for you to say something or to ask or whatever.
Well, I think you really spoke to Shavuot and what we've all been through, and thank you for that very concrete tool of trying to take it and moving it forward. And thank you again for coming and joining us and sharing your Torah, and may it be a merit, and may we all think of your message of unity and of having those high moments and bringing them back down. So thank you, Rachel.
Wonderful, wonderful. Chag Sameach.
You too. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Racheli. We are up to our next presenter, and I'd like to call on Herbert Bloch, who is the Executive Director of one of our main partners for tonight, the American Zionist Movement, who will be introducing Mr. Isaac Herzog, who I see. Oh, okay, so Herbert, please.
Thank you, Rabbi. On behalf of the American Zionist Movement, I am very pleased to introduce today and welcome to this program Mr. Isaac Herzog, who has served for almost 2 years now as chairman of the executive of the Jewish Agency for Israel, the Sochnut. It is not often that I get to introduce someone who was an upperclassman in my school, Ramaz, in New York many years ago, a few years ahead. But Bushi Herzog is someone who really needs no introduction. Before taking over the leadership of Jaffe, the Sochnut, and becoming the leader of the global Jewish community, he served for more than 15 years in the Knesset and in many ministerial roles and as head of the Labor Party. Isaac Herzog's yichus as a Zionist leader also comes from his late father, President Chaim Herzog, and his grandfather, Chief Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac Halev Herzog, and his uncle, Abba Iban. He also served as a prominent attorney and in many other roles in the private sector and public sectors in Israel. The Jewish Agency building on King George Street, where Isaac Herzog sits, also the headquarters of the World Zionist Organization, with which our organization, AZM, is affiliated, as we are the Zionist Federation in the United States, has a personal connection to me that came full circle this year. My late father, Rabbi a Machal volunteer in the Haganah, danced in that courtyard after the UN partition vote of November 29, 1947, Kaftep in November. And it was to that building and that same courtyard that my son Joseph went a few months ago to get his paperwork to begin serving now as a lone soldier in the IDF. For me, this represents the important role of the Jewish Agency and the Zionist movement in connecting global Jewry and Israel. This effort could have no better leader at this time than our next speaker, Isaac Herzog. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Herbert. So we share common denominator because my mother, Ora, was wounded heavily in March 48. It was the first suicide bombing in the history of the land. When a Palestinian suicide bomber tried to kill David Ben-Gurion in our building, in the room actually I'm sitting in right now in Yerushalayim, from where Ben-Gurion went to declare the state of Israel. So my mother was heavily wounded here, but they also celebrated, of course, the announcement of the state of Israel in this building as well. So it's a pleasure to be with you all. And thank you for your introduction and for the excellent work, Rabbi Feldman, you're doing as well. AZM is a very distinguished historical organization, and I want to congratulate all the Anglos that are on with us. Look, I'm the concluding lecturer, and I think that after you've heard all the lectures and the issues at stake, we understand that the Jewish world is at a crossroads, because the coronavirus crisis clearly has placed something unique on the shoulders of Jewish infrastructure. We're a nation built upon gatherings, communal life, minyan. What is the notion of minyan if not communal life, if not meeting, mifgash? And under such premises where we have a social distancing and a lockdown, this paralyzes communities. We at the Jewish Agency, we understood that communities are in dire need of assistance all over the world. And we've established a special fund to assist communities. And it is an overwhelming phenomenon that we are flooded by requests, and we've granted over $6 million already in 60 allocations to communities all over the world because of the pressure they're in. But the issue at stake is, of course, how does the Jewish world emerge out of this crisis? And where is the silver lining? So we are emerging out of the crisis with a couple of topics that need to be dealt with. What is community? What is leadership? How does one keep the morale of the community? Where's the centrality of Israel in all of this, in the paradigm? What about Aliyah? And what about security of, and fighting anti-Semitism and education? What are we going to do with summer camps and with immersive programs? Luckily, we have still 4,000 Masa participants in Israel. And Masa was recently granted the first and only operator to bring in youth, young Jews from all over the world, still pending quarantine, but for their year-long program. So what we've concluded after, the last few months, and after holding a major global forum yesterday with the Ministry of Diaspora Affairs, with major global and regional Jewish organizations, is the following. Number one, we do expect a major wave of Aliyah following the coronavirus. And that's because there's somewhat of a shift in the paradigm. Whilst in the past, World Jewry was always there to support Israel in its needs in crisis, Israel has emerged out of this crisis more strong, more impressive. People look at Israel and say it functioned well, took relatively good decisions, despite the fact that we know there's criticism in Israel, that's natural, but nonetheless, it was impressive, and it is impressive. And we know that parallel to that, there are many Jews who said to themselves, this is the time to make a decision and go back home. Secondly, we project a wave of anti-Semitism. We see already how much tension, hate, racial tension exists here, there, everywhere. We see what's on social networks. We call communities to be at caution. Immersive programs will be on hold for quite a while. We'll slow down until travel will resume. We will have to find alternative methods of introduction, of getting to know each other. We have the program of partnerships and the program of between communities here and there. We have the program of twinning schools and many other programs, so we can find ways and means to connect even on the networks and still encourage visitors and find ways and means to bring as many youngsters as possible. What about our shlichim, who've become a major infrastructure of social services in communities? But our young shinshinim, the 18-year-old gap year kids, had to go back home, and we want to bring them back to communities. And there are, of course, issues pertaining to the responsibility of the State of Israel in coming towards the communities in need. And I welcomed the message by Minister Yankelevich yesterday that she and the government will do their best to come and assist. So there are many challenges, clearly, and I believe that in such times, this is a major time for a call of unity. Unity in explaining to Israelis the need to care for their brothers and sisters abroad, and unity for our brothers and sisters abroad to care for Israel, and unity meaning less tension within, less arguments, dialogue, yes, but less strife and less rift. I hope this will be the message. It's not easy. We are not naive at all, but I think it's a moment whereby in Israel, one could have seen the impressive connectivity between the Israeli groups in Israeli society who didn't know each other so well before. And I think it's a time for groups within the Jewish world to know each other better, as we have seen the horrible tragedies of thousands of Jews who perished because of the corona in unproportional numbers in certain countries. So I want to wish you all a happy Shavuot. Remember, it's a month of unity. It's a moment where we got the Torah, and it's said in the annals of our history, in the Mekorot, that it was a great moment of unity of our nation. I open the floor for questions and comments on any issue you deem fit within the time frame allotted to me. Thank you. Toda rabba and Chag Sameach.
Thank you, Mr. Herzog. And I invite everyone to put your questions on the chat. Mr. Herzog will take your questions, and perhaps I will lead with a question. You said that we expect an uptick in Aliyah, and we ourselves, my family, we made Aliyah 2 years ago.
Where from?
From New York City.
And where are you a rabbi?
On the Upper East Side of Manhattan. I was working with Manhattan Jewish Experience with young Jewish professionals. And now I'm doing so in Tel Aviv with Am Yisrael Foundation, Keren Am Yisrael.
And how are we treating you?
Thank God. We love it here. We're happy here. And, but honestly, we were, well established in our careers. And for young people who don't have the resources, it's a big challenge. And we know particularly the people from France have had that challenge. How can we address this? And of course, there are cultural challenges as well. But the practical challenges, how can we address that? Because I think that obviously Corona will change that, because people see that nothing is certain and there are many uncertainties, and you adapt to what the conditions are. But how can we address making it more viable for people to be able to come?
Look, it ain't easy, it was never easy. Depends a lot on so many factors. We have a very big operation that focuses on the ingathering of the exiles in all possible ways. And we are trying to accommodate with the Ministry of Absorption and all the organizations that operate within this realm, such as Nefesh B'Nefesh and others, to give an answer to the fears, to the limitations, to the setbacks. It's also an age issue. You realize it. I mean, because there's the issue of employment, the issue of finding your way around, in leaving Artzecha u'Moledetcha u'Beit Avicha and going straight to the new land. It's not easy at all. We had today like a Tikkun Leil Shavuot at noontime of all the employees of the Jewish Agency, and we were divided on Zoom, hundreds of people to various groups, and I was allotted randomly to the group of employees who made Aliyah and telling their experience in making Aliyah. So already I'm apologizing for the behavior of some rude Israelis throughout the ages who just didn't understand and don't understand what it entails to cross the ocean literally to get to Israel. And so we are trying to find ways and means to help, but there's also many NGOs who can make it simpler and softer. And I can't just give an advice off the cuff here. It's definitely on our top priority.
Thank you. We have some questions here. Thank you very much, Mr. Herzog. We have some questions here on the chat.
Go ahead, read them.
So, the first one is, מה עושה לדעתך קהילה חזקה ומה תפקיד הסוכנות בחוזקות?
So, קהילה חזקה, meaning a strong community, it's a very good question. What makes a strong community? I can tell you that from my analysis, first of all, it depends a lot on the ability of the community to accumulate certain resources for bleak days. North America, all in all, is quite stable and impressively well organized. And the Jewish federations of North America with the federations have raised quite substantial sums to help the needy and the community and the social services, etc. But the communities who collapse, take for example, Italy. 20,000 Jews in 22 communities, some of the most historical, Genoa, Venice, etc. They collapsed because the infrastructure of the community was evolving according to just very tight resources on a very long time and an aging community. Or take South Africa. South Africa is under huge pressure because of the devaluation of the local currency, the rand, in a very rushed way, which shortens their capability to sustain a viable community when all the good people are leaving to other countries and there's an aging community. I think the strength of the community is judged by very good leadership, very good lay leaders, by involvement, by bringing in younger people, if possible, by connecting to Israel. And we are very proud to help communities with very good shlichim, top of the tops of Israel who come over and serve in the communities.
Thank you. The next question from an Ole 2 years ago, and he said it's very tight. Israel is a very tight knit community, so it's hard to break in and to find a job. And he said was the hardest thing in terms of professionally, friends. Israel, you know, people go to school together, the army, they have their chug.
We call it the Old Boys Network.
B'nai Akiva. Yeah. So what would you advise Ole of how to break into that?
Look, you know what moved me immensely was last week receiving 100 new Olim from Ethiopia and standing together with the newly appointed Minister of Absorption, Pnina Tamano-Shata, who at the age of 4 came just like these guys and their kids from Ethiopia. Which means Israel is a land where you break glass ceilings in a very impressive way all over the country. And I believe that, you know, Olim made incredibly well in Israel because when you're talented and capable and able and you're entrepreneurial, at the end it works well in Israel. Not always, I know it's difficult, but there are some very impressive stories. And all in all, there are many organizations for Olims. Take, for example, Nefesh B'Nefesh is a very organized way of marketing and arranging a softer landing in Israel. The same goes with the Ministry of Absorption and the Jewish Agency in Klita. We have a vast amount of programs in helping direct people to the academic world, to the professional world, and so forth, including finding jobs. And there are many volunteers and departments in local municipalities, and there are municipalities which are eager to bring in Olim to their communities.
Okay, thank you. We have a couple of political questions about prospects for peace with the Palestinian and Arab neighbors.
Yeah, I saw these questions. I will just answer in brief because I'm committed to staying non-political as far as I can. It's no secret where I came from. I was leader of the opposition. I was candidate for prime minister, leading candidate in 2015 against Netanyahu. I'm a centrist by my views on politics. I'm a believer in national unity. And I do not want to relate to a possible annexation, yes or not, because I believe that there's a lot of theoretical sides to this discussion. We do not know really what will come forward for a resolution. I think there's going to be a lot of deliberations behind the scene. I think there's in Israel, people do understand that Ma'ale Domim or Gush Etzion will be in any arrangement part and parcel of Israel. The question will be whether other territories will be and what will be the impact on the peace process with Jordan and other Arab countries. So there's a lot of noise, and since I know politics, a lot of spin until we see the reality. I am worried, of course, and we have to be very cautious on the rising of possible tensions and so forth and so on. And I think we have to follow on that as well.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Lana Heiderman, one of our panelists, she asked, how is your vision different than others who have lofty goals? In other words, how do you take lofty goals and translate them into kind of changes on the ground and moving things forward? It's
Look, I've been leading many enterprises and big organizations and turning them upside down. When I took over the Ministry of Welfare and Social Services back in 2007, people told me this is going to be your cemetery. And I found a ministry without a minister for 4 years, social services derelict and paralyzed. And I turned it upside down. I'm regarded as a major revolutionary of social services. First of all, it's the spirit that you bring in. Spirit of optimism, of group alignment, of teamwork, of understanding that there is a destiny and that you serve a great cause. I sincerely believe, like in the Jewish Agency, we're coming forward with great ideas. We are a very innovative and strong organization that encompasses the entire Jewish world and its challenges. And I invite you to enter our website and our social networks and see what a great work we do. Now I see a question out there saying, look, you should know that despite the valuation of the rand, the spirit of the South Africa community is very active and in action. I absolutely agree to. I think the South African Jewish community is full of Zionism, love of Israel, and zestfulness. The problem is, of course, that we do know and we are aware how difficult the financial situations of the communities is, because they don't get a penny from the government, any government, and they have to raise the money for synagogues, schools, kindergarten, all private, and for security, and for the old age called Chevra Kadisha, including all the social services. So these are big challenges for communities. And at the end, whilst there is a spirit in youth movements, they are very limited in their social, financial capabilities. So you need to have a very strong leadership to turn things upside down, but you always need to find sources of funding.
Thank you. Lisa Klug. Hi, Lisa. Jewish travelers who arrived before lockdown, and they chose to stay here, and now they're in a place where to get a work permit or extend their tourist visa, they need documents that they don't have here and are in a sense trapped. How can the Jewish Agency assist them?
No, we're dealing with that day in, day out. So we have the Global. The Global is almost our 24/7 service in 7 languages, helping Jews prepare for Aliyah, opening the files, then the interview, then the whole process of bringing them over to Israel. So everybody who has a full-fledged permit for Aliyah can make Aliyah. The question, of course, is whether there is transportation from the country where he has been approved of. So during the COVID-19 crisis, we brought in 1,200 Olim from 15 countries, and we are going strong. As for those who opened the file after the crisis started and when all the offices are in the lockdown, there are rules on how to carry out the interview by Zoom and to bring a special documentations proving that you don't have any criminal record or criminal past. And that's always, and that's assumed to take 2 to 3 months in order to make Aliyah. And slowly but surely, we expect to see many Olim coming, mostly as of the end of June, beginning of July.
And if people are from Chutz, but they're here, but they can't go back because it's still raging over there, but
no,
they
that's crazy. I've faced many situations where you have a mixed couple, one member of the family without an Israeli passport, the other only with Israeli passport. People can't travel or can't go, or even people who are separate because they can't come in because there's still no flights. And if they do, they have to go through quarantine. I'm sorry, we are trying to press as much as possible. As you see, things are being lifted slowly. Now we have a new Minister of Health, Yuli Edelstein, who's very prone to understanding the need of world Jewry all over the place, here, there, and in Aliyah. And we hope it'll be moving swiftly after Shavuot.
Okay. Any idea when people from abroad will be able to visit Israel from the US? Will there be any airport testing so people can come if they're clean and they're not infected?
Well, that's been worked upon. There was an initial tour of the airport this week by the heads of the Ministry of Health, but they did not come yet with answers. It is assumed, so they have it within the grapevines, that somewhere beginning July, mid-July, everything will be open. But again, I don't want to say things that I'm not authorized, or I don't know if I'm correct. And there's a lot of pressure to speed it up by travel companies, tourist companies. Now they're going to do this arrangement with Greece, Cyprus, Slovenia, and Austria, perhaps Georgia. that they will enable free access in and out of all countries for tourism's sake.
Okay, last question. I know you have another event, so
Right.
last question just from me. What is your long-term vision for Aliyah, for Israel? How do you think things will go now after Corona, and how can we keep the momentum going?
There will be a momentum. It is clear that there will be a momentum because we see amount of files open and we see amount of calls. I also say to those who ask questions about opening files, approach our global. If you don't find it, although it's a 1-800 number and it's well known, it's on all our sites, ask AZM and we'll make sure our team gets back to you with all the details. Anyway, I want to thank you all. I do believe that it's a great moment for Israel and the Jewish people. I think, I'm a true believer in the state of Israel. I know there are many challenges and there are moments of disappointment because we are all human beings. It's in the Bible. So, but we have to strive forward. And I think this is a moment for doing and for coming over. So I wish everybody a happy Shavuot.
Thank you very much. Chag Sameach, and thank you for
Chag
joining.
Sameach. Thank you. All the best.
Okay, everyone. We thank again our partners, American Zionist Movement, Israel Forever, and the Israel Track, Tzohar, and Makor Rishon, and all the other partners who participated. Thank you, Alicia Post, for helping us coordinate. And thank you to all of you for joining us. And we look forward to having you continue join us. Those of you who are in Tel Aviv, we have our various organizations as part of the Am Yisrael Foundation. We have Tribe Tel Aviv Internationals, Tel Aviv Salon, White City Shabbat. And we look forward to soon being able to resume events. I know that facilities are opening up, but since they're still asking for social distancing, we don't want to create a situation where people won't be able to keep to the regulations. So we're hoping that in the next few weeks, things will start to lead to the next level of opening up, and we'll be able to come back to our live programming in person and to be able to see all of you. So have a good evening, everyone. Chag Sameach, happy Shavuot, and thank you for joining us. And also look out for Monday nights. We've been running the Sunset Series on Zoom, and hope to be taking it live again soon. So have a good night, everyone, and Chag Sameach.